Chapter 127. Yu Pinyin led the army back to the capital and did not show his face all the way, because Emperor Chongkong deliberately blocked the news. No one knew that the Western Yi people were about to be exterminated by other tribes. The courtiers thought about the army the most every day. Today you impeach me, tomorrow I impeach you. They were all fighting endlessly for the merit of ascending to the throne. Emperor Chongkong was very happy to see this, but in fact, the butcher knife in his hand was already raised high. The army would arrive at the capital in a few days. Yu Pinyin had no choice but to send his sister back first to deceive others. As the two of them talked, they kissed again. Just saying goodbye took almost an hour. It was only when Liulu risked her life to urge the two of them to separate. Because she was a girl, she could not always live in Zhonggua Temple. Therefore, 2 months after she left, Shen Yuanqi ordered a servant to disguise as her and return to the Shun Fu. Then, he announced to the public that his sister was seriously ill and refused to see guests. Yu Xiang sneaked into the Shun Fu through the corner gate and saw Shen Yuanqi staring at her with a dark expression. "You're back." He walked over and looked at his sister from head to toe. "Are you well?" "I'm well, I can't be better." Yu Xiang smiled with squinted eyes. Shen Yuanqi could not bear to see her sweet appearance and scolded with a fierce face, "Quickly freshen up and go out to see the 9th princess. Little Jur, why are you here? Didn't you say that I was seriously ill and refused to see guests? The 9th princess's body is priceless. If she insists on coming in, how can I stop her?" Shen Yuanqi's dark expression faintly revealed a smile, and his tone softened. "The 9th princess is loyal and righteous. After knowing the truth, she tried her best to cover it up for you. Thanks to her frequent visits to you these past few months, no one suspected anything. Otherwise, if word got out, your reputation would be ruined. If they want to say it, let them say it. I won't lose a piece of meat. Anyway, no matter what others say, Big Brother will never abandon me." Seeing his brother glaring at him, Yu Xiang hurriedly changed his words. "But I still have to thank little Jur. I'll clean up and go see her." Only then was Shen Yuanqi satisfied. He went to the side hall to report to the 9th princess. Because the 9th princess would visit the Fu every 3 to 5 days, and because his younger sister wasn't here, he couldn't just let her sit there and do nothing. Therefore, Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to put aside the etiquette between men and women and talk to her. Over time, he actually began to like the innocent the 9th princess a lot more. Time was short, so Yu Xiang only washed his face, changed his clothes and hurried to the side hall, just in time to hear the 9th princess giggling happily. After leaving the hustle and bustle of the battlefield, this burst of laughter instantly caused her eyes to turn red. "Xiang'er, you're back." The 9th princess saw her best friend and immediately pounced on her. She pinched her arm and said, "You've lost weight. Come and eat something." Yu Xiang staggered from her pouncing. Only then did he realize that she had gained a lot of weight after not seeing her for a few months. Her face was round, and her white skin was tender like a crystal bun. "The 9th princess is right. Why haven't you come and eat yet? These past few months you've been eating dry rations. It's been a long time since you've eaten a meal of white rice, right?" Shen Yuanqi was very distressed. As he spoke, he ordered the servants to prepare food and wine. In order to avoid arousing suspicion, he said a few words and then left. "Don't go." Before the 9th princess finished speaking, he had already left. His tall and handsome back that was like bamboo went farther and farther away. "Don't look. My big brother is very polite. Taking time out every day to say a few words to you is already the limit." Yu Xiang raised one eyebrow and joked, "I've been gone for several months, but it seems like you're not worried about me at all. Look, how fat have you become? You said you came to see me, but in reality you came to see my big brother, right?" The 9th princess hurriedly glanced at the palace maids standing by the door. When she saw that they didn't hear Yu Xiang's whispers, she sighed in relief and said with a red face, "You're so smart. You even guessed it. Lord Shen is so handsome. He's the most handsome man in all of the great Han dynasty. I can't get enough of looking at him. Did you know that every time he sent me away after I finished eating the pastries? In order to stay a little longer, I ate as much as I could, and that's why I became fat. I was also worried about you, but Imperial Father and Imperial Mother both said that you were fine." Yu Xiang pinched her chubby double chin. While holding back his laughter, he said, "So it turns out that you've suffered so much. Don't worry, in the future you can come and see if you want to. I definitely won't force you to eat. Whenever you've seen enough, I'll send you back." Imperial father is right. Xiang'er, you're really loyal. The ninth princess beamed with joy. She gave her a thumbs up and continued, "Then what do you think about me being your sister-in-law?" Yu Xiang was drinking tea. When he heard her words, he almost choked to death. When he finally caught his breath, he covered her mouth and warned, "Princess Shang, this isn't a small matter. You mustn't say this outside. Otherwise, my big brother will be roasted on a fire. Your marriage will be decided by your imperial father. You don't have the final say." The ninth princess was listless. She felt that the pastries were tasteless. After sitting for a short while, she got up and bid farewell. Before she left, she mumbled that she would come back tomorrow. After Yu Xiang returned to her room, she immediately took a fragrant flower petal bath. In front of the mirror, she fiddled with the rouge, pearls, hairpins and other things that she hadn't touched for a long time. "Help me apply some nail polish." She placed her hands on the dressing table. Tao Hong and Lulu hurriedly took out small bowls to make balsam flower juice. When they smelled the refreshing fragrance, they suddenly felt as if they were in another world. After applying the nail polish, Liolu, on the spur of the moment, helped her mistress comb her hair into a very delicate and complicated bun. She specially picked out that gorgeous pearl hairpin and inserted it into the bun. She also picked out a bright red silk long dress for her mistress to change into. After Yu Xiang was properly dressed, she drew her eyebrows and lips in front of the mirror. She held a thin sheep hair brush and dipped it in wax and gold powder. Then she drew a blooming lotus between her eyebrows. She raised her eyebrows slightly and turned to Tao Hong asking, "How is it? Am I beautiful? After rushing about outside for several months, your mistress's appearance hasn't deteriorated, right?" "Not only hasn't it deteriorated, miss, you've become much more beautiful. I'm simply stunned." Tao Hong gave her 2 thumbs up. Lulu pursed her lips and smiled. "Being too beautiful is also a kind of sin. My legs have to be good and bad sometimes. Otherwise, if they're too eye-catching, they'll attract trouble." Yu Xiang held her cheeks and sighed with a smile. The corners of Lulu's lips twitched slightly. What you said really came true. One moment Yu Xiang said that she would attract trouble. The next moment, a little girl came to report that the Sun family had come again. Because of Madame Sun's arrangements, that girl died and left behind a blood letter. However, for the sake of 500 taels of silver and dozens of mu of fertile land, her family refused to help her redress her grievances. If it weren't for the fact that they wanted to continue blackmailing the Sun family, they would have burned the blood letter as well. Shen Yuanqi found that family several times. As soon as he said the words redress her grievances, they cried and made a fuss. They would rather die than comply. Shen Yuanqi had no choice but to pinch his nose and admit it. Who knew that even though he admitted it, Sun Mingjie wouldn't admit it? He had long coveted Yu Xiang's beauty, and considering that she had broken her legs, he could do whatever he wanted with her in bed. If she died, he could just say that she was weak and died of illness. There was simply no more suitable wife candidate than her. Therefore, Sun Mingjie refused to give up and sent Iceman to propose marriage again and again. At first, they were polite, but after Shen Yuanqi was suspended for pleading for the crown prince, the Sun family became arrogant and said that they wanted to take Yu Xiang as a concubine, which made Shen Yuanqi so angry that he almost vomited blood. Yu Xiang listened to the little girl explain the whole story in a few words and walked to the front hall angrily. As soon as she stepped through the threshold, she heard Iceman sneer and say, "Lord Shun, hurry up and agree. If you pass this village, there won't be such a shop. Young Master Sun has now taken up a job in the Ministry of Personnel. Not only is he handsome and elegant, but he also has a great future in front of him. On the other hand, what else does your young miss have besides her looks? Not only is she eccentric, but she also can't walk. Although she has been cured, she can't walk as well as ordinary people. You are still the minister of the Supreme Court. In the future, when the emperor demotes you, it will be extremely difficult to marry your young miss into a family like the Sun family. Because most of the officials in the crown prince's line were abandoned by the emperor, and the prime minister's future was uncertain in the imperial prison, Shen Yuanqi, a foot soldier, would be demoted sooner or later in the eyes of the world. Therefore, this Iceman not only didn't have any respect for Shin Yuanqi, but also faintly despised him. Before Shin Yuanqi could speak, Yu Xiang sneered and asked, "You want me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture, to be a concubine of a lowly official? Where did he get the face to do that? Why don't we go to the palace tomorrow with Madame Sun to see the Empress and ask her if there is a precedent of a Minister of Agriculture being a concubine of a sixth-ranked official in our country? If there is, I have no other choice but to marry into the Sun family. I will have someone send a letter to the Empress to ask for an audience. You go back and tell her that I will be waiting for Madame Sun at the palace gate tomorrow morning. I won't leave until I see her." The bright red brocade robe was blown up and down by the wind, and a strong fragrance hit the face, making people intoxicated. The young girl was originally bright and beautiful, and at this time her eyes were flashing with anger, making the golden lotus between her eyebrows seem to be burning. This was a kind of breathtaking beauty. Just looking at her, it was as if the eyes were stabbed by a knife, and it was very painful. Iceman subconsciously stood up to greet her, and the arrogance on her face was replaced by fear. How could an ordinary person touch a young girl who was as hot as fire? She couldn't help but think to herself. When she understood the meaning of her words, she was even more scared out of her wits. Family Yu and Family Shin were in dire straits, so everyone forgot the identity of Yu Xiang as the Minister of Agriculture. Now that she mentioned it, Iceman thought of this and secretly complained in her heart. It is this servant who is arrogant. How can the Minister of Agriculture be worthy of a mediocre person like young Master Sun? This servant will go back to Madame Sunday. Please don't blame me. Iceman apologized and retreated. As for the appointment to see the Empress tomorrow morning, it was not something she could solve. It was better to let Madame Sun have a headache. She could provoke anyone, but she had to provoke the famous Miss 3U. Although she had changed her surname, her temper had not changed at all. The 9th princess was protecting her. No matter how poor she was not someone who could be bullied by ordinary people. Iceman regretted it, for fear that Yu Xiang would raise her whip and whip her. Fortunately, the Lord Shun stopped her and let her escape unscathed. People are bullying you. Why are you still being a good person? Yu Xiang glared at her brother fiercely. Chapter 128. Yu Xiang and her elder brother sat down to chat. Only then did she know that the Lin clan had helped the third branch to defame Yu Pinyin. She was so angry that she almost broke her teeth. Now the third branch has been in the capital for almost a month. They live in the courtyard across from Marquis Yongla. Every day they run around for the sake of redressing their names. In order to overthrow the Prime Minister and completely eliminate the Crown Prince's power in the court, the supporters of the 5th and 6th princes are doing their best to promote this matter. Many people say that not only will Yu Junwei be reinstated, but he will also inherit the title of Marquis Yongla. His eldest son's scholarly achievements will also be restored. In the future, the third branch will be the most prominent branch in Prefecture Yu. The clansmen who were punished by Yu Pinyin are now gathered around Yu Junwei. They have the momentum to support him as the clan leader. He is not as ruthless as Yu Pinyin. After returning, he took the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi into the food to take care of them. He also visits old Madam every day, saying that he wants to provide for her. Shin Yuanqi slowly narrated the family Yu's recent situation. Yu Xiang's fingertips trembled as she listened. She fiercely said, "What a good third branch. They are deliberately angering the old ancestor. They are so savage before they have the power. In the future they will cry." I always thought that the Lin clan still had some feelings for older brother. I didn't expect that as soon as she learned of older brother's death, she would defame his reputation. Does she treat older brother as a son or an enemy? Even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. She is worse than a beast. Shin Yuanqi was extremely disdainful of the Lin clan's actions. However, he also felt that it was unfair for his younger sister to favor one and discriminate against the other. He ridiculed, "Yu Pinyin has a mother worse than a beast and a sister who is fickle and unjust." The heavens saw that he was pitiful and helped him by giving him a child bride who is affectionate and righteous. I Shin Yuanqi am the most pitiful. I only have a relative who always favors outsiders. She leaves far away without saying a word. It makes me worry every day and unable to sleep. Yu Xiang felt very apologetic after hearing what he said. She hurriedly hugged him and teased him. The longer the brother and sister got along, the more they felt that their personalities were congenial to each other. Their initial restraint and alienation had long since been replaced by intimacy. After Yu Xiang coaxed his brother, he immediately prepared a gift and went to the suburbs of the capital to visit the old lady. On the other side, Yu Miaoqi was dressing up in her room. Behind her stood two beautiful maidservants, both of whom were bought by Yu Junwei's wife, Madame Zhua. "Miss, which one of these head ornaments do you like?" The two maidservants each held 2 boxes in their hands, which were filled with luxurious head ornaments decorated with gems and pearls. Although the third branch had just returned to the capital, because Yu Junwei was expected to be reinstated and regained his title, and because the two princes were deliberately trying to rope him in, there was an endless stream of high officials and nobles who came to visit. At the same time, they also sent many valuable gifts. They had suffered a lot in Shu County for several years. When they came back, they only carried a few parcels and looked very down and out. However, in less than a month they had everything. They only needed to wait for the emperor's imperial edict to redress the injustice. Then they would be able to open the sealed Marquis Yongla across the street and live in a grand manner. Therefore, although these sets of head ornaments were expensive, they were nothing to the third branch's family. Yu Miaoqi pointed at the exquisite Luan and Phoenix jadeite head ornaments and slowly said, "Wear this set. It matches my dress very well." The maidservants busily took out the head ornaments and helped her pin them in her hair. Right at this time, the Lin clan lifted the curtain and came in. She walked to the dressing table and seemed to want to say something, but then hesitated. In just a few short months she had lost a lot of weight. Her originally white skin was dry and sallow, and her forehead was covered with fine wrinkles. She looked as if she had aged several decades. Yu Miaoqi saw the interest in her eyes and waved her hand to send the maidservants away. She said impatiently, "What's wrong with you now?" "Nothing. I just feel uneasy being alone, so I thought I might as well come and see you." The Lin clan sat on the embroidered stool and sighed. Her face was full of confusion and helplessness. "Then take a good look. Your daughter, I will soon be a phoenix in flight." Yu Miaoqi used her fingertips to touch the Luan and Phoenix hairpin made of jadeite and gold thread on her head. Her voice was very proud. "When the dust settles, that person will take me into the palace. Based on my contributions, I can at least be conferred the title of consort. When I have a meteoric rise, I'll have that old thing take you back in a grand manner. You have to keep the letter of divorce well. When the time comes, I'll have her swallow it whole." "Don't. You must not anger old ancestor. She is my mother-in-law and your grandmother." The Lin clan repeatedly waved her hand and said worriedly, "Yan Er's corpse hasn't even turned cold. Yet I'm already helping the third branch to slander his reputation. If your father knew in the underworld, would he blame me? Didn't I tell you? Right now my status is too low. Only by allying with third uncle can I compete with the other noble daughters. You help third uncle take back his title, and he sends me into the palace. We're just using each other. In the future, when I give birth to a prince and ascend to the empress position, I will definitely help eldest brother clear his name. I still remember how third uncle framed eldest brother. I won't forgive him. When the time comes, I'll just say that third uncle used my life to force you to falsely accuse your son. Other people will understand. If eldest brother doesn't have an heir, I will definitely adopt a talented child from the clan for you to raise and inherit eldest brother's title. You don't need to care about the slander of outsiders. You also don't need to care about third uncle's family. Daughter will take care of it." Yu Miaoqi patiently explained. The Lin clan listened in silence and only pinched their handkerchiefs to wipe their tears. Madame Zhua's sharp voice came from outside the door. Yu Miaoqi hurriedly sat up straight and fixed her hair in front of the mirror. "Cheer, are you done dressing? If you're done, let's set out." Madame Zhua lifted the curtain and walked in. She walked 2 laps around Yu Miaoqi and praised, "Cheer really has a good appearance. No wonder noble lady likes you so much and repeatedly told me to take good care of you. Do you like the 4 sets of head ornaments that were just sent over? If you don't, have the shopkeeper of Splendid Pavilion make another trip until he's satisfied." "Thank you, Auntie. Miaoqi likes them very much. Did noble lady have a message for me?" Yu Miaoqi's cheeks flushed red and her eyes were filled with shyness. He did. He told you to be at ease and wait. As long as this matter is over, he will definitely welcome you into the palace with 8 palanquins. Madame Zhua smiled sincerely, but there was endless ridicule hidden in the depths of her eyes. That person had made friends with Yu Miaoqi in order to deal with Yu Pinyin. Now that Yu Pinyin was dead, Yu Miaoqi was dispensable. Not to mention 8 palanquins, it was already good enough that he remembered her. If it weren't for the fact that the master had the idea of climbing up to the new emperor and insisted on sending one of the family Yu's daughters into the palace, if it weren't for the fact that her daughter was already married in Shu, if it weren't for the fact that Yu Miaoqi was truly beautiful and elegant, she definitely wouldn't have accepted this pair of mother and daughter. Yu Miaoqi seemed to be touched. She slightly lowered her eyes and smiled faintly. The two once again fixed their makeup and ignored the Lin clan in the corner. They sat in the carriage and headed straight for the suburbs of the capital. The third branch had finally made it through. Naturally, they wanted to vent their anger in front of the matriarch. On the surface, Madame Zhua urged the matriarch to live with them, but in reality, every word she said brought up Yu Pinyin's death. She wanted nothing more than to anger the matriarch to death. They brought many servants with them and easily broke open the door to the inner hall. The matriarch was drinking medicine. When she saw who it was, she directly threw the medicine bowl at them and cursed, "Slut, you still dare to come? Mother, calm down. Don't vomit blood like last time. Look at what kind of place you're living in. The walls are moldy. Why don't you come home with me?" Master received news that in 3 days, the edict to reinstate his position and inherit his title will be issued. The seal on Marquis Yongla's door can also be opened. You've lived there your whole life. It's time for you to go back. Madame Zhua dodged the medicine bowl and sat in the Taisher chair, talking to herself. Grandmother, no matter who is in charge of the Marquis household, you are still our elder. We will definitely be filial to you. Although eldest brother has passed away, there is still brother Hong. Both of them are your grandsons. Yu Miaoqi sat next to Madame Zhua and smiled faintly. The brother Hong she spoke of was Yu Junwei's legitimate son, Yu Pin Hong. Right now he was studying at home, preparing to return to his official career. The matriarch was so angry at these two that her heart ached. She roared, "Someone come. Beat these two damn things out of here." However, the servants of the Marquis household had either left or scattered. The remaining people were the elderly, the weak, the women, and the children. They were really powerless against the young servants brought by the third branch. The servants pushed and shoved each other. Yu Miaoqi and Madame Zhua were still in the mood to drink tea and watch the show. When Yu heard the news, she hurried over. Just as she reached the fork in the road, she saw the door open again. Yu Xiang, wearing a bright red silk dress embroidered with golden silk, slowly walked in. A gust of wind blew, blowing the strong scent of flowers onto Yu's face. She involuntarily took a deep breath and shouted in surprise, "Xianger? You're back?" "I'm back." Yu Xiang was about to raise her lips when she heard the noise in the inner hall. Her face immediately darkened. "Who has the guts to fight with my old ancestor?" She untied the barbed whip from her waist and fiercely whipped at a servant. That person immediately covered his face and howled miserably. Blood flowed out from between his fingers. Everyone was silent for a moment. They involuntarily opened up a path for her to walk to the front of the hall. "Xianger? Is that you, Xianger?" The matriarch stared at her in disbelief. "It's me. Old ancestor, I've come to see you." She quickly stepped forward and hugged the matriarch. She leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Gij is also fine. Now that he has defeated Shi, he will return to the capital the day after tomorrow. The emperor has his own arrangements. You must not say anything right now." The matriarch trembled. She immediately hugged her and cried bitterly. She cried and repented, "Xianger, it's good that you can come to see me. I'm old and muddle-headed, that's why I did something wrong. You must not hold a grudge against me." "How could I? I can hold a grudge against anyone, but I can't hold a grudge against my own old ancestor. We will always be a family." Yu Xiang also felt something in her heart, and her eyes slowly turned red. Yu pushed away the servants and walked over. The three of them hugged each other and cried bitterly. "Yu Xiang, you're finally here. I thought you didn't plan on recognizing your grandmother in this lifetime." Yu Miaoqi broke the reunion scene of the three people. A few days ago my leg injury relapsed and I urgently needed to seek medical treatment, so I was delayed for a few months. I'm not like you, an ungrateful and heartless white-eyed wolf. Yu Xiang helped the matriarch sit up straight and helped her pour a cup of ginseng tea. Only then did she slowly open her mouth. Yu Miaoqi angrily glared. Just as she was about to refute, she heard Madame Zhua sneer, Yu Xiang, oh no, look at my memory. You should be called Shun Xiang now. Your surname is Shun and our surname is Yu. What right do you have to meddle in family use matters? You even injured my family's servants the moment you arrived. You're really shameless. Do you really think you're the Marquis Yongla's D Miss Third? I don't think I'm the Marquis household's D Miss Third. I only think of myself as the Marquis household's official Marchioness. Of course Yu Xiang still couldn't say this out loud. She could only cover her mouth and laugh. I really do have a big face. Madame Zhua, have you forgotten? Although I'm no longer the Marquis household's D Missy, I still have the title of Minister of Agriculture above my head. If we're talking about rank, you have to kneel and salute when you see me. Chapter 129. Yu Xiang had been in seclusion for several months. Outsiders thought that she had lost her status as the D-Miss of the Marquis household, so she was ashamed to see people. However, they all forgot that although the D-Miss of the Marquis household had a high status, it was not higher than the village lord. The emperor had never issued an edict to strip her of her title, so she was still the village lord. Ordinary women like Madame Zhua and Yu Miaoqi, who had no rank or rank, had to kneel and greet her as the village lord Nyang Nyang. At this time the two of them were struggling between kneeling and not kneeling. Their facial features were twisted with resentment and unwillingness, making them look very terrifying. Yu Xiang slowly fed the old Tai Tai tea. After a while she berated in a deep voice, "These brats don't know etiquette. Beat them out of here." Mama Ma and the others seemed to have found their backbone. They picked up sticks, brooms, feather dusters and other things and aggressively beat them up. Madame Zhua could not order the servants to fight back. If they bumped into Yu Xiang in the chaos, the matter would become big. She could only lift her skirt and run away with her tail between her legs. Yu Xiang was still unwilling to give up. She shouted at their fleeing figures, "Madame Zhua, I'll kindly warn you. Yu Miaoqi killed her adoptive mother, secretly harmed her adoptive brother, framed her D-sister, and colluded with her biological mother to frame her D-brother. Her coldness and viciousness are rarely seen in the world. If you have any intentions of using her, be careful that in the end, you'll be eaten by her until not even your bones are left." Madame Zhua's footsteps paused. When she crossed the threshold she tripped. Yu Miaoqi quickly reached out to help her, but she slapped her hand away. It was clear that her words had already entered her heart. However, Yu Miaoqi urgently needed the third branch's power to help her ascend to the position of imperial concubine. When she returned, she would rack her brains to curry favor. If she could not make her lower her guard, then the family Yu would change the person she sent into the palace. Glory, splendor, wealth and rank could be overturned because of these words. Yu Miaoqi's hatred for Yu Xiang could be imagined. She had made up her mind to make Yu Xiang suffer a fate worse than death once she achieved meteoric success. When everyone had left, the old lady hugged her granddaughter in her arms again and patted her. She called her darling non-stop and repeatedly asked if she had suffered along the way. "With the care of Master Ku Hai and Master Ku Hui, your granddaughter didn't suffer. Gij is also doing very well. He will arrive in the capital in a few days." Yu Xiang told the old lady everything that had happened after he left for Shijiang. The old lady's tears kept flowing as she said firmly, Okay. It doesn't matter if you win or lose on the battlefield. As long as you can go home safely, it's fine. In the future, old ancestor will go to the Zhenghua temple to ask for an auspicious day for you and Yan to hold your wedding ceremony. I have already spoken with the Lord Shun. I will pay for the betrothal gifts and dowry. I will definitely let you have boundless glory with your red dowry. As for what sibling incest, let those mediocre people talk about it. We just have to care about living our lives. Yu Xiang was overjoyed. She hugged the old lady's neck and acted coquettishly. "Old ancestor, you still love me. In the future, I will definitely help you give birth to a nest of great-grandchildren. We will have 4 generations under the same roof. What do you say?" The old lady's heart was filled with sweetness. She smiled until her eyes couldn't be seen and repeatedly agreed. You see, you also smiled, but 2 lines of tears flowed from the corners of her eyes. The old lady was very distressed when she saw this and hurriedly hugged her to comfort her. Xiao Xianzhe, that child is affectionate. I think he is a good person. When your eldest brother comes back, we will hold your wedding again. It will be 100 times grander and livelier than before. Our whole family will borrow your happy occasion to wash away the bad luck. You see, you hurriedly lowered her head to wipe her tears. After Zhuoshe returned home, she immediately left Shun Miaoqi and went to find Yu Junwei. The two previously saw that the noble person had a bit of interest in Yu Miaoqi, and thus chose to send her over. Now that Yu Xiang pointed it out, they realized how ungrateful Yu Miaoqi was. Even her adoptive father, adoptive mother, adoptive brother, legitimate sister, and legitimate grandmother did not even blink an eye. Her heart was simply made of stone and could not be warmed no matter what. Now that she was in dire straits, she would naturally be gentle and obedient. When she gained power, she might stab her in the back. After staying in Shu for so long, my brain has also been damaged by the hard work. I actually thought of sending her over. Yu Junwei looked at his calloused hands and sighed. After 6 to 7 years of hard labor, he had even forgotten the art of observing people. Then let's choose someone else. There is no one more beautiful than her in the clan. Let's go outside and find someone or adopt a talented child from a branch family for a few years. If you return to your official position, the noble person will need to rely on you. Even if you don't mention it, he will ask himself. In any case, the noble person is still young and is not in a hurry. Zhuoshe's face showed a hint of arrogance. Yu Junwei was a Shu son and relied on his own ability to participate in the imperial examinations and become an official. At the age of 30, he became the Minister of Appointments. His ability was not to be doubted. If he was not too conceited and greedy, he would not have been pulled down by others. In order to stabilize the throne, the new emperor had to take in a few daughters of the influential families into the palace. The important position of the Minister of Appointments naturally had to be shared. Yu Junwei thought that when he became the emperor's father-in-law, it would be difficult for others to take him down. Moreover, he had the intention of using the Lin clan. Thus, he pinched his nose and took in the mother and daughter pair. Now that he had new considerations, he felt very uncomfortable and said, "That old thing seems to have already divorced the Lin clan? Then our family you has no obligation to support her. When the noble person is done, you can send them far away." "I know." Zhuoshe nodded and hurried down to find a beautiful young girl. Yu Miaoqi heard that Zhuoshe had summoned the clansmen to see him, and each of them brought their own daughters. They were all between the ages of 11 and 12. How could he not understand what she was planning? He was so angry that his eyes turned red. However, the noble person had repeatedly warned her not to meet him before the great cause was accomplished. She could only grit her teeth and endure. In her heart, she was only thinking that the noble person was still thinking about her. When Yu Pinyin was here, she felt very humble. Without Yu Pinyin, she found that she was as humble as dust. Like her, Madame Sun was also unable to calm down. After hearing Iceman's report, she remembered that Yu Xiang still had the title of Minister of Agriculture. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. "Mother, why are you in such a hurry? The crown prince has been imprisoned, and the empress is in seclusion. Kuaning Palace refuses to see guests. The two of them couldn't even protect themselves. How could they care about the family Shin's business? Let her go. Let's see what she can come up with. I like such a strong woman. It's fun to play with." Sun Mingjie licked his fingertips. His feminine face had a bit of ruthlessness. Madame Sun felt relieved when she heard this. She sneered and said, "My son is right. She went to beg the empress, and I went to beg my sister-in-law. My sister-in-law is deeply favored by the emperor and is pregnant with the emperor's child. Could it be that she can't suppress an empress who is about to be deposed?" It turned out that the lord's son also had a younger sister who was 16 years old. She entered the palace during the election last year. Because of her outstanding appearance, she was quickly bedded. Now she was 7 or 8 months pregnant. She was pregnant with Emperor Chongkang's youngest child. Therefore, she was very favored by Emperor Chong Kong. A month ago, she was promoted several ranks, from a small 5th rank Liangyuan to a 1st rank concubine. This was also why Madame Sun dared to be so rampant. The mother and son discussed the matter of entering the palace tomorrow without the Lord Sun's knowledge. They wanted to ask for a marriage decree from Consort Sunday. Of course, no matter how bold they were, they didn't dare to take the emperor as a concubine. They planned to torture Yu Xiang to death, and then marry another noble daughter. The next day, Yu Xiang was not surprised when he waited for Madame Sun at the palace gate. After the two entered the palace, they parted ways. One went to see Consort Sun, and the other went to see the Empress. "You're finally back. Is Yifeng well? His Majesty and I are waiting for him to return to the capital." The Empress was very happy to see Yu Xiang. She took his hand and asked. She was not curious about how Yu Xiang found Yu Pinyin. With Master Kuhai leading the way, it seemed that nothing was impossible. Seeing that there was no one left and only Song Mama, who was deeply trusted by the Empress, was standing in the corner, Yu Xiang said in a low voice, "Brother is very well. He should be able to arrive in the capital tomorrow." Good, good, good. The Empress smiled comfortably. Then her face darkened as she asked, "I heard Song Mama say that the Sun family wants to take you as a concubine?" "That's right." Yu Xiang nodded. Ben Gong remembers that her son is currently working in the Ministry of Appointments. He's only a secondary class, 6th rank minister counselor, yet he dares to take the emperor as a concubine. He really has a lot of face. Where's Consort Sun? Call her over. Ben Gong wants to ask her face to face where she wants to place the emperor's personal title of emperor. The empress's eyes were filled with anger. Replying Yang, she went to see Consort Sun. Yu Xiang said bluntly. The empress's eyes were filled with anger. She said in a low voice, "Good. They didn't come to see Ben Gong first after entering the palace. Instead, they went to see Consort Sunday. They think that Ben Gong will be deposed if the crown prince falls, so they don't put Ben Gong in their eyes." The empress had suffered a lot in the past few months. Her son was inexplicably imprisoned. There were voices everywhere in the court calling for the crown prince to be deposed. Even the two little imperial grandsons were asked to be demoted to commoners. If it weren't for the fact that Yu Pinyin's victory over Shi made Emperor Chong Kong so happy that he couldn't help but reveal the truth to the empress, she would still be in the dark and live her life with her tail between her legs. Tomorrow Yu Pinyin would enter the capital. How could she endure it? She sneered. Send someone to pass on an imperial decree. Say that Consort Sun doesn't know the rules. Order her to go to the temple and reflect on herself. She's not allowed to get up until she kneels for 12 hours. Song Mama hesitated. But Nyang, Consort Sun is already 8 months pregnant. Normal people can't stand kneeling for 12 hours. She's a pregnant woman, she might. Just go, don't worry about anything else. The Empress waved her hand impatiently. It was true that Consort Sun was pregnant with the imperial seed, but this child wasn't as favored by Emperor Chong Kong as the rumors said. It turned out that Consort Sun had studied medicine since she was a child and had the ability to feel one's pulse. When Emperor Chong Kong was selecting consorts, he helped her up and she felt his pulse. Unexpectedly, she found out that he was seriously ill and was nearing the end of his lifespan. She entered the palace to seek a bright future, not to be buried with him. Thus she made some aphrodisiac medicine and had Emperor Chong Kong drink it. After a few entanglements she became pregnant. If not for this, how could Emperor Chong Kong, who was so ill, be able to walk around? She originally thought that if she had a child she wouldn't need to be buried with him. If she gave birth to a prince she could live outside the palace with him. Who knew that she would inadvertently reveal this matter to Consort Sun? And in a panic, Consort Sun would reveal it to her son. Sun Mingjia was smart, and immediately realized that this was a great opportunity for political investment. Gradually, he became acquainted with the fourth prince. Since then, Consort Sun had no choice but to pass on information to the fourth prince for her own life and the future of her child. After Emperor Chong Kong investigated Chief Physician Su and found that he wasn't a suspect, he turned his attention to the imperial concubines in the harem. Consort Sun, who could unexpectedly become pregnant when he was so weak, was like a firefly in the night, with nowhere to hide. Now that Yu Pinyin was coming back, Emperor Chongkong would soon clean up the court. Naturally, the child in Consort Sun's belly couldn't be kept. After all, she was pregnant with the dragon's child. She couldn't let it fall to its death again, right? The Empress had endured for a long time. Just as she was thinking about how to deal with Consort Sun, Yu Xiang handed her a knife. It was really to her liking. This time, not only could she get rid of a future trouble, but she could also intimidate the restless imperial concubines. It was killing several birds with one stone. The Empress naturally wouldn't tell Yu Xiang about the dark secrets of the harem. Yu Xiang saw that the Empress had schemed against both the adult and the child in one move, and she didn't hide it at all. After thinking a little, he knew that the Empress was calm and wouldn't act so recklessly. Consort Sun must have stepped on her, or even Emperor Chongkang's bottom line. Since the Empress dared to do it, she definitely wasn't afraid of Emperor Chongkong holding her accountable. Chapter 130. When Yu Xiang left, it was midsummer, and when she returned, it was the 12th lunar month of winter. Outside, the northern wind was howling, and it could be said that a drop of water would turn into ice. The palace of Gongquan was surrounded by man-made lakes. During the 3 seasons of spring, summer, and autumn, the dark blue lake water was hidden between the vast sea of green trees. The scenery was intoxicating. However, once winter came, the lake water would freeze into ice. From afar it looked white. It was beautiful, but it made people feel cold to the bone. The palace burned the earth and lit the braziers, but Consort Sun was still wrapped in a fox fur cloak. Her already bulging belly was even more shocking. Her appearance was elegant, and her skin was white. At this time she was lazily reclining on a soft couch. Because of her successive promotions, her brows were relaxed, and she naturally carried a bit of arrogance and nobility. "Nyang Nyang, your belly looks sharp. You must be pregnant with Xiao Longzi," Consort Sun said attentively. Consort Sun rubbed her belly and smiled. "Is that so? It doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. In any case, this child is blessed. Why did sister-in-law come to the palace this time?" Consort Sun hurriedly told her about how Yu Xiang had failed to become a concubine, and had changed the betrothal gift to her. Consort Sun frowned. "Of all the girls to marry, why did you choose Yu Xiang? She has already returned to the family, and her brother is about to be removed from his position. Her adopted brother died without a complete corpse, and his title has fallen. Not to mention her own temperament, her legs are inconvenient, and she has a chronic illness. What benefits does Yu Mingjie have by marrying her? This consort can help Mingjie pick anyone who is 100 times better than her." "Nyang Nyang, you don't know, but Mingjie likes fiery girls like her. He says it's more fun to play with them. How would this subject dare to let him get close to a girl from a good family? It's better to marry Yu Xiang and let Mingjie torment her for a few years to dissipate the evil in his heart. When Mingjie's temperament stabilizes, let her suddenly die, and then we can marry another noble girl." Consort Sun lowered her voice as she replied. Sun Fei was naturally aware of her nephew's problem, and had even helped him cover it up. After hearing this, she thought for a moment and felt that using Yu Xiang to temper her nephew's temperament was also a good idea. Family Shen and family Yu had both fallen. Who would care about Yu Xiang's life and death? Alright then. This consort will summon Yu Xiang over to take a look. Consort Sun waved her hand and had a palace maid go to Cunning Palace to invite her over. She was now the only woman in the palace who was pregnant, and she had been promoted by Emperor Chongkong for 2 months in a row. The speed of her promotion was rarely seen in the world. Not to mention the other imperial concubines being envious, jealous, and hateful toward her. Even she herself felt like she was floating in the air. She thought that Emperor Chongkong doted on her and her child so much that she even had the idea of begging Emperor Chongkong to confer her a title of prince as soon as she was born. Moreover, she had already boarded the new emperor's ship. Even if Emperor Chongkong had passed away, she and her child would still live comfortably under the new emperor's care, unparalleled in riches and honor. Therefore, she gradually forgot her duties and didn't put the empress in her eyes. Otherwise, she wouldn't have sent a little palace maid to Cunning Palace to ask for her. If this was a normal situation, it would be so arrogant that it would make people speechless. Of course, in the past few months that the empress had been in seclusion, She had also experienced many similar provocations. In the past she had silently endured it, but today she couldn't tolerate it anymore. Therefore, without waiting for Consort Sun's palace maid to step out of the inner hall, a female official from Cunning Palace strode in and said, "Her Highness the Empress has issued an imperial decree, reprimanding Consort Sun for not knowing etiquette and not understanding the hierarchy. She is to reflect on her mistakes in Gongquan Palace and kneel for 24 hours before rising. Her Highness, please." The female official bowed and led Consort Sun to the Buddhist hall in the rear hall. Because every emperor of the Great Han Dynasty was a devout believer in Buddhism, the imperial concubines in the harem followed suit and set up a Buddhist hall in the palace. When they had nothing to do, they would kneel and recite scriptures to show their compassion. The Buddhist hall in Gongquan Palace was next to Linshui Pavilion. Although the 4 windows were tightly shut, the northern wind continued to blow in through the cracks. The temperature was enough to freeze a layer of flesh off a person. To have Consort Sun, a pregnant woman about to give birth, kneel and reflect on herself was equivalent to having her die. When Consort Sun heard this, she was so shocked that she almost fell off the soft couch. Consort Sun was even more incredulous. She said that the Empress was using her power for personal reasons to harm the imperial heir. She wanted to go to the Emperor to complain. The female official didn't stop her and allowed her to run towards Yangxin Palace Hall with the palace maid. "Does Her Highness want to go in alone or wait for the Emperor to issue an imperial decree?" The female official smiled at Consort Sun, her attitude very gentle. "Wait for the Emperor." Consort Sun clutched her belly and said through gritted teeth. The two didn't speak for a while and waited quietly. Inside Yangxin Palace Hall, Dr. Piao was taking Emperor Chongkang's pulse. Emperor Chongkang was suffering from pneumonitis, which was the modern era's so-called lung cancer. He had been coughing up blood for a very long time. Master Ku Hui had also gone to the palace to take a look, but he couldn't do anything about it. Dr. Piao's medical skills were only on par with Ku Hui's, but he had a secret technique that could prolong one's life. Although he couldn't snatch someone from the hands of the King of Hell, he could greatly reduce the pain and time of death. Because he only treated one person once and never a second time, Emperor Chongkang didn't dare to let him treat him unless he was on the verge of death. "Dr. Piao, how much time do we have left?" After taking his pulse, Emperor Chongkang calmly asked. "If your Majesty hadn't been poisoned with a tiger wolf medicine that damaged your blood essence, you would have had 4 to 5 years of life left. This commoner will try his best. At least 5 or 6 months, at most 1 or 2 years. There's no fixed number." Dr. Piao said bluntly. "A tiger wolf medicine damaged my blood essence." These 2 sentences circled around the tip of Emperor Chongkang's tongue. Although his tone was gentle and his expression was calm, his deep and serene eyes hid a chilling murderous intent. Sun Fei's medicine could unknowingly arouse his interest. Because his body was weak, he hadn't been aroused for a long time. After tasting the strength of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger several times with Sun Fei, he thought it was a sign that he had just recovered from his illness. In addition, Sun Fei was pregnant, which proved that his masculinity hadn't diminished. Because of this, he was very happy for a while and even promoted Sun Fei's position. But after learning that Sun Fei was an expert in taking pulses and medicine, he realized that the so-called strength of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger was nothing more than poison. The so-called bearing of a dragon and ferocious of a tiger was in exchange for his own life. If Sun Fei didn't know that he was ill and drugged him, it would be pardonable. But she knew that the emperor was seriously ill and was about to die, yet she still drugged him with a tiger wolf medicine just to give herself a bright future. Her actions were no less than regicide and rebellion. Emperor Chongkang previously had high hopes for Sun Fei's child, but now he hated it. But in order to not alert the enemy, he continued to support her and promoted her to a first-rank concubine. Now that Yu Pinyin was about to return to court, his crime of conspiring with the crown prince to force the emperor to abdicate and rebel would be resolved. And in these few months, Emperor Chongkang and the crown prince each drew up a list of officials in their hearts. The officials on the list were either loyal or traitorous, important or eliminated. It was very clear. A foul wind and a rain of blood were about to break out. Emperor Chongkang didn't mind using Sun Fei to sharpen his butcher's knife. Therefore, when Sun Fei rushed to Yangxin Palace Hall and cried out for her innocence, he waved his sleeve and coldly said, "Give each of them 30 strokes and throw them out. Bring Zhan's decree to Sun Fei and have her kneel until the empress is satisfied." The chamberlain received the order and immediately had the imperial bodyguards capture Sun Fei and the palace maids. In the open space in front of the hall, they took off their pants and gave them 30 strokes. Then, a female official was sent to Gongquan Palace to announce the decree. "What? That's impossible. I'm still pregnant with the dragon's child. The emperor can't treat me like this. You must be faking the decree. I want to see the emperor." Sun Fei was so frightened that her liver and gallbladder were about to burst. She wanted to run to Yangxin Palace Hall, but she was caught by the palace maids and forced to sit on a prayer mat in the temple hall. Because the female official didn't allow the palace maids to burn the earthenware or braziers in the temple hall, Sun Fei only knelt for a short while before she felt a throbbing pain in her stomach. In addition to her frantic state of mind, she couldn't calm down. Soon a large patch of blood appeared on her skirt. In Cunning Palace, the empress received the report from the female official and only lightly smiled. She stared at the bleak winter scenery outside the window. It was unknown what she was thinking, but her eyes overflowed with endless sorrow. Seeing this, Yuxiang naturally didn't dare to stay any longer. He ordered Lulu from Taohong to push a wheelchair over. After sitting down, he was about to leave. The empress personally got up to help him and asked, "Didn't you say that your leg injury has been cured? Why do you still need to sit in a wheelchair?" Replying, "To your highness, the journey to Shijiang is long, but because I couldn't bear the fatigue and injured my bones, I can only walk for half a day every day. For the rest of the day, I still need the maids to push me." After experiencing this internal strife and betrayal, the empress liked people like Yuxiang more and more. In the eyes of ordinary people, Yuxiang's actions were no different from betraying the orthodoxy and shocking. In the eyes of the empress, he was someone who valued friendship and justice and knew how to repay kindness. Not to mention being harsh, she didn't even have enough time to reward him. The empress said, "It's been hard on you" several times and told him to come to the palace often to play in the future. Only then did she order Mama Song to send him out. After Yuxiang left the palace, he didn't leave immediately. Instead, he ordered the driver to stop the carriage on the side of the road and wait for Madame Sun to be punished. Tao Hong and Lulu were so shocked that they broke out in a cold sweat. At this time, they finally dared to take out their handkerchiefs to wipe their sweat. They whispered, "Making a pregnant woman, who is 7 or 8 months pregnant, kneel in the temple on such a cold day. If Consort Sun really has a miscarriage, I'm afraid the empress will be criticized by the court officials and their wives." Criticized? Let them be. Yuxiang blew away the dust stuck to his nail polish. His smile was indescribably sarcastic. It's because the empress is usually too virtuous and kind. After she lost power, she let a little concubine ride on her head and behave atrociously. She endured and pretended for a lifetime, but in the end, she still ended up with her son being imprisoned and herself being crippled. Although it's fake, it's enough to make people reflect bitterly. Once forced into a desperate situation, even the kindest person will show their darkest side. The empress really wants to see blood right now, so I just happened to give her a knife. However, Consort Sun is a talent. Not only did she offend the empress, she also offended the emperor. I don't know what she did to anger the heavens and the people. Yuxiang reached into his sleeve to warm his hand, his eyes deep in thought. Who cares what she did? In short, after today, I don't know if there will be a Consort Sun in the future. Lulu said worriedly. It's just that the empress used you as a raft. If this matter spreads, your reputation will be even worse. Yuxiang didn't feel annoyed by this. Instead, he chuckled. I threw away that thing called reputation 800 years ago. The empress did use me as a raft, but I still have to thank her. Think about it, if this matter spreads, who in Shangjing would dare to provoke me in the future? Even the Consort Sun, who was the most favored in the 6 palaces, had such a miserable end. In the future, anyone who wanted to make trouble for his master would have to consider whether they had enough weight. Lulu thought that this was indeed the case, so she smiled. Chapter 131. The strength of a royal guard staff was not something that an ordinary person could withstand. After 30 hits, Lady Sun was already half dead. She also heard that Consort Sun was currently kneeling in the temple to reflect on herself. In 24 hours, the dragon fetus would definitely be lost, and there was even a possibility of 2 lives. She had entered the palace this time for her son's marriage, but she did not expect that not only was the marriage ruined, even the pillar of the Sun family had fallen. Lady Sun simply could not understand what had happened. Her sister-in-law was clearly so favored, and the emperor had promised that as long as she gave birth to a dragon child, he would immediately make her a Qinhuang. Why did he want to kill her sister-in-law in the blink of an eye? Lady Sun was not stupid. How could she not see that the emperor and empress were working together to punish her sister-in-law? Her body hurt like it was being torn apart, but the anxiety in her heart was worse than the pain in her body. She wanted to immediately return to the Fu and have a good discussion with her son. She felt that the emperor's sudden change in attitude was not a good sign, as if the sky of the great Han dynasty was about to change. Lady Sun, has the imperial decree for the marriage arrived? If it has, then give it to me so that I can go back and prepare the dowry. The family Shun's carriage was across the road. Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and smiled brightly. My family's madam is seriously ill. Miss Shun, please make way. A maidservant lifted the curtain and said politely, seriously ill? Didn't you have your pants taken off and beaten? There are so many guards in front of the hall. Madam, you're really not embarrassed to have your lower body exposed in broad daylight. If it were me, I would be embarrassed to death. Yu Xiang did not deliberately lower his voice. This was also the main road of the palace. The people passing by were all high officials and nobles. Hearing this, they all turned to look. Lady Sun, who was already at her last breath, was so angry that she almost vomited blood. She shouted herself hoarse, go back to the Fu. Hurry. She felt like she had died if she stayed here for a moment longer. Make way, she's in a hurry to go back. Yu Xiang waved his hand at the carriage driver. The carriage driver immediately moved out of the way. He watched as the Sun family's carriage quickly disappeared among the pointing fingers. Yu Xiang put down the curtain, held a small hand warmer and said, let's go. There is still a big show waiting for us in the Sun family. When Tao Hong heard this, he couldn't help but laugh. He urged the coachman to speed up. On the other hand, Lulu looked helpless. The 2 carriages arrived at the Sun residence one after the other. The gatekeeper had already received the news and sent someone to bring a bamboo bed out to receive the madam. The Lord Sun was still working at the yamen, and the Sun Mingjie was on vacation. When he heard that his mother had gone to the palace, not only did she fail to ask for the empress's decree, she was even punished with a plank. He had been waiting at the corner gate for a long time, and a few drops of sweat could be seen on his forehead. To be punished by Emperor Chongkong personally, and to be punished in front of so many guards in Yongxin Palace Hall, his mother must have caused a lot of trouble. Right now, concubine Sun was still kneeling in the ice-cold Buddhist temple. It was easy to predict what would happen in 24 hours. He wasn't a fool, and he had already considered the worst possible outcome. It's coming, it's coming. Quickly go and pick up, madam. When the servant saw the carriage, he hurriedly carried the bamboo bed covered with thick and heavy bedding over. Mother, how are you? How is Her Highness? What exactly happened to make His Majesty so angry? Sun Mingjie held Madam Sun's hand and asked repeatedly, You are Sun Mingjie? A clear voice came from the carriage behind them. Sun Mingjie turned his head and looked back. What he saw was the beautiful figure that he had played with countless times in his dreams. At this time, that person's chin was slightly raised, and her expression was arrogant. Her bright red lips spat out hurtful words. With your appearance that is neither male nor female, you dare to covet me, the dignified Minister of Agriculture? Why don't you take a mirror and look at yourself? Do you think you're worthy? Sun Mingjie hated it when others called him a man with a feminine appearance. He glared at her with bloodshot eyes, and a murderous look appeared between his brows. Yu Xiang smiled contemptuously and waved his sleeve. Don't glare. Even if you glare, I won't lose a piece of flesh. I have something here for you. Please accept it. As soon as her voice fell, she saw another carriage in front of them. Several strong servants came down carrying a huge iron cage. Inside it was a pure white swan and several hundred toads. She had gone through a lot of trouble to find so many toads in the middle of winter, and even put them on the fire cage to smoke them awake. Toads were supposed to be the food of swans, but there were too many toads in the cage. They were densely packed together, and the sight was full of white, venomous lumps of flesh. Even a human would feel terrified just looking at them, not to mention the swans in the middle of them. That swan raised its long neck and let out a shrill cry. The high volume attracted all the passers-by. Everyone looked at Yu Xiang, who was leaning against the car window and smiling brightly. They all wondered which unlucky guy messed with this devil again. In terms of temperament, all the dandy young masters in the capital couldn't compare to this family Yu. Oh no, this young miss of the family Shun. Sun Mingjie stared at the iron cage, gritted his teeth and asked, Miss Shan, what do you mean? Sending these toads to disgust me? No, I just want to tell you a truth. Yu Xiang raised her eyebrows slightly and said in a light tone, this miss is a swan, and you are a toad on the ground. A toad wanting to eat swan meat is purely delusional. As soon as her voice fell, the servant opened the iron cage and threw it at the gate of the Sun residence. The helpless swan was freed and immediately flew into the sky. After a few long cries, it turned into a black dot and disappeared into the horizon. The toads couldn't fly, so they jumped in front of the gate of the Sun residence. Because of the poisonous mucus on their bodies, the servants of the Sun residence all avoided them. Someone knocked over the bamboo bed, causing Madame Sun to fall down and crush several toads to death. The scene was disgusting and funny. The onlookers roared with laughter. Sun Mingjie was so angry that he wanted to kill someone. If he had a sword in his hand, he would have already stabbed at Yu Xiang. After this, if anyone wanted to marry into a higher family, others would use the phrase, a toad wanting to eat swan meat, to ridicule him. Let's not talk about this for the time being. Yu Xiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Before he could react, the carriage disappeared around the corner of the street. Sun Mingjie's face was distorted and his voice was hoarse. He shouted with all his strength, Shun Xiang, if you offend me one day, I will make you beg for death. It was just catching a few toads to disgust people. Yu Xiang's method was no less than a child's prank in the eyes of the onlookers. However, Sun Mingjie's last declaration was a bit excessive. In addition, he always had the reputation of being an immortal young master. At this time he revealed his sinister true colors, which surprised the crowd and made them talk about it. Those who were interested had already gone around to find out why the two families had a grudge, and they were even more disgusted with the Sun family's actions. When the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death came from the palace, everyone realized that the Sun family's good days were over. Lord Sun was very frightened, unprecedentedly frightened. First, he received an anonymous letter in the yamen. When he opened it, he found that it was a letter written in blood, which recorded his son's heinous crimes. Before he could go home to ask, news came from the inner palace. His wife was punished by the emperor with 30 strokes of the cane for making a racket in front of the palace. Consort Sun disobeyed the empress and was punished to reflect on her mistakes. He didn't dare to send people to the palace to inquire about the news. He could only resign and go home under the strange gazes of his colleagues. As soon as he stepped into the house, he received the news of Consort Sun's miscarriage and sudden death. What the hell is going on? Why is my Sun family on the verge of extinction in just half a day? What did you do? It's not as simple as you killing a girl. Tell me quickly. Lord Sun kicked open the door and threw the letter in his son's face. Madame Sun lay on the bed and trembled. Sun Mingjie held the letter in his hand and didn't say a word. The servants left one after another, and the room fell into a dead silence. Lord Sun slumped in the armchair and said word by word, I just got the news. Consort Sun, she has suddenly died. The little prince also died in the womb. Our Sun family was originally fine. How did it become like this? I've always followed the rules and was cautious. I've never caught the emperor's eye, let alone angering him to this extent. Since the two of you can deal with this murder case behind my back, you must be able to plan other things behind my back. Tell me, and we can think of a way together. Madame Sun buried her face in the soft pillow and sobbed. Sun Mingjie staggered to his father's side and said in a hoarse voice, "There's no other way. I'm afraid father can only jump into this fire pit with me. Either we father and son become famous and have a meteoric rise, or we'll be consigned to eternal damnation and never reincarnate." The emperor suddenly got rid of consort Sun must have found some clues. The only thing they could do now was to inform the fourth prince, and let him prepare to force the emperor to abdicate. Fortunately, the fourth prince had already infiltrated the Dragonscale Guard and the inner palace. The crown prince had also handed over all his connections to the fourth prince, including many important officials in charge of the capital's defense. It wouldn't be difficult to surround the imperial city at lightning speed. Consort Sun's death had caused many undercurrents. Yuxiang was currently on her way home. She even ordered Tao Hong to buy a few caddies of fried melon seeds. She ate them while looking at the scenery on the streets, looking very carefree. "Wait, isn't that Chang Yafu?" She pointed at the mother and daughter in splendid pavilion. "Ah yes. Didn't she hide in her hometown? Why did she come back? And her face is full of joy," Lulu said in surprise. Chang Yafu was trying on a jade hairpin in front of a mercury mirror. Duke Jingguo's wife accompanied her by her side. She covered her mouth and chuckled as she spoke, looking very uneasy. Something joyous must have happened at Duke Jingguo's residence, Lulu guessed. Chang Yafu's face is full of bashfulness. She must have found her ideal husband. Who could she marry based on her reputation? She's not like me, who has long since found herself a peerless husband. Yuxiang muttered to herself for a moment, then suddenly laughed. "Look at me, how could I forget about Yu Pinhong, who just returned to the capital? Didn't the two of them have an affair?" Now that Yu Junwei has a chance of being reinstated and inheriting his title, and Yu Pinhong has a chance of returning to his official career, she immediately came looking for him. After going around in circles, this pair of adulterous man and woman finally got together. Tao Hong had always loved to inquire about gossip, so he knew a lot about the third branch's family. He asked curiously, "But Yu Pinhong already got married in Shu. The other party is an ordinary village woman. He even brought her back this time." Yu Xiang sneered and said, "Yu Junwei is indeed a sanctimonious hypocrite. He clearly wants to kill his daughter-in-law, but he still brought her back to show that he is a man of honor. However, how can a village woman stand up to the marquis household? At this time, if he marries another wife for his son, others won't be able to find fault with him. Looking at all the noble ladies in the capital, who would be willing to be a second wife? Only someone like Chang Yafu, who comes from a noble family but has lost her reputation, is the most suitable candidate." At that time I exposed Chang Yafu's secret, but I didn't expect that I would end up helping a pair of lovebirds. The affairs of the world are truly unpredictable. As she spoke, she poured out the melon seed shells in her hand. Coincidentally, Chang Yafu looked up. Her beautiful eyes widened, but soon after, she chuckled and mouthed silently, "Did you see that? I still became the marquis, madam." Yu Xiang coldly glanced at her, then lowered the carriage curtain and said, "When brother comes back, I will immediately get married and let her know who the real marquis madam is." Chapter 132. The Lord's son had spent his entire life studying agriculture and water conservancy. He didn't have any great ambitions, but he didn't expect to marry a stupid and greedy wife, give birth to an ambitious and tyrannical son, and have a younger sister who wanted to go to the imperial palace for riches and honor. The reputation of the Sun family for 5 generations was destroyed just like that, and he was powerless to reverse the situation. He could only make the best of it. In the past, the Lord's son would just stand among the officials and listen to them. He was very calm, but today even the hand holding the ceremonial tablet was trembling. Cold sweat seeped out of the edge of his official's hat, dripping down from his hair and earlobes. He didn't dare to wipe it off, so he could only move slightly and hide behind the Minister of Works. When he looked up, he met the eyes of the fourth prince, who was walking forward leisurely. He was stunned by the burning desire in the fourth prince's eyes. "Lord son, are you feeling unwell?" The fourth prince looked back and smiled. He was as elegant, benevolent, and generous as the rumors said. "Thank you for your concern, fourth prince. I've caught a cold, but it's nothing serious." The Lord's son lowered his head, not daring to look directly at the fourth prince. The weather is cold. You should wear more clothes when you go out. The fourth prince said a few words of concern, then went to the front hall, where only the princes could stand. The fifth prince and the sixth prince also arrived. Although they smiled when they saw each other, their eyes flashed with daggers and swords. Some of the officials didn't look sideways, some were inattentive, and some were wild and restless. In short, today's court was still surging with undercurrents as usual, as if an ominous storm was brewing in the air. The arrival of Emperor Chong Kong made the already stagnant atmosphere even heavier. He said expressionlessly, "If there's something to report, then report. If there's nothing to report, then withdraw." The fifth prince and the sixth prince weren't willing to give up. They once again incited the officials to report that the crown prince should be deposed. However, they had been fighting for several months, but the crown prince was still sitting firmly on the throne. At this time, they were also a little anxious and said that the crown prince's crimes were unforgivable and should be executed, and that the two young imperial grandsons should be demoted to commoners. Kill the crown prince? Emperor Chong Kong repeated the court official's request word by word, his expression dark and gloomy. The Lord's son felt that the already cold air had condensed into grains of frost, and when he breathed it into his nostrils, it brought a piercing pain. He raised his eyes to look at the fourth prince, but all he saw was the fourth prince's straight back and his tightly clenched fists in his sleeves. He retracted his gaze and lowered his head even further. He could vaguely hear the sound of soldiers marching and the clashing of weapons, but he felt that it might be an illusion. Emperor Chong Kong sat on his throne for a long time without saying a word. He only used a strange, hair-raising gaze to size up his several grown sons. The fifth prince and the sixth prince, who were still fervently giving their speeches, gradually quieted down, not daring to say anything. Emperor Chong Kong suddenly curled his lips into a smile, and slowly turned his head to look at the fourth prince. Seeing that he was neither servile nor overbearing, indifferently standing there, the smile on his lips deepened, and the coldness in his eyes became more and more frightening. The fourth prince's tightly clenched fists made cracking sounds, and just as he was about to slowly raise them, he saw an imperial bodyguard rush into the main hall, shouting as he ran, "Reporting to your majesty, Xizang has won a great victory, and the victorious soldiers have already returned to the court. They are waiting at the city gate. May I ask when your majesty will enter the city?" "Good, you're finally back." Emperor Chong Kong retracted his gaze and laughed loudly, shaking his sleeves as he said, "For the time being, the court will be adjourned. My beloved officials, follow Jean to the palace gate to welcome the meritorious officials of the great Han dynasty." If not for his ill health, he would have led the officials to the city gate to welcome them. Victorious? Returning to the court? Didn't Xizang lose the war and ask for peace? How could there be another great victory? The officials discussed spiritedly. A month ago, there were reports of the war, saying that the Han army had suffered a crushing defeat and had lost 2 cities. The people of Xi had already sent a message to the great Han dynasty to negotiate peace. At that time, the storm of dethroning the crown prince had caused a great deal of commotion, and the majority of the officials had advocated for peace. The emperor had also sent the head of the Li Fan Yuan to Xizang to discuss the contract. How could there be a victory in just a few months? Moreover, the hundreds of thousands of soldiers had set out to return to the capital, and along the way, there was not the slightest bit of information leaked out. Someone had deliberately sealed off the eyes and ears of the people in the capital. Looking at the entire great Han dynasty, who had this kind of control over the heavens and the earth? Who could play with the civil and military officials of the court, including the princes, in the palm of their hand? And what was their goal? The officials raised their heads to look at Emperor Chong Kong, who was sitting on the throne. Some of their eyes revealed shock, some of them rejoiced, and some of them had faces full of despair. Emperor Chong Kong took in everyone's expressions one by one, and only then did he step onto the imperial carriage and head for the palace gate. The officials followed in a single file. A few of them fell down because their legs had gone soft, and they could not get up for a long time. The Lord's son's face was ashen, and his heart was like a piece of wood. He reflexively looked at the fourth prince, But he saw that he was still as calm and composed as before, as if the army's arrival was within his expectations. The hundreds of thousands of soldiers were waiting in the suburbs of the capital. Force the emperor to abdicate. Force the emperor to abdicate? He was afraid that the moment he succeeded, the imperial city would be flattened by the army that had not yet lost its blood. Was the emperor's arrangement a coincidence? It was obviously not. In fact, he had seen everything, but he did not act. Either he lay in wait or he would kill in one strike. This had always been the emperor's style of doing things. The officials who had been arguing in the court just now were now like gourds with their mouths cut off, not daring to make a sound. Yupinyan rode his horse and stood in front of the majestic city gate. Behind him was a black mass of soldiers that one could not see the end of. Every one of them had a solemn expression on their faces, and their hands were tightly gripping their swords and halberds. The murderous aura that came from fighting on the battlefield made it difficult for the bailiffs to breathe. Their faces were pale as they stood on their tiptoes to look in the direction of the imperial city, hoping that the eunuch who had come to deliver the edict would hurry over. In particular, the official standing under Yupinyan's horse was drenched in cold sweat, as if a ladle of water had been poured over him in the cold weather. After several battles, Commander Yu's murderous aura had become even stronger. His eyes were pitch black and did not have any human emotions. Instead, he looked more like a demon or a walking weapon. When he looked down, his cold and indifferent gaze was like he was looking at an inanimate object. Why hasn't the imperial edict arrived yet? Send someone to the palace to report. The official could not take it anymore. So he grabbed someone and shouted. Yupinyan was as motionless as a mountain, but his horse spat out a mouthful of white air, as if it was impatient. Just at this moment, several figures suddenly appeared on the city wall, waving handkerchiefs in their hands. Who's up there? Who allowed you to let people up? Hurry and chase them away. When the official saw this, he wished he could drag those people down. This was an army returning to court, not some monkey trick for people to watch. However, the expressionless Commander Yu suddenly opened his mouth. That's this Marquis family. Please make an exception for them. The bailiffs who were about to chase them away were petrified, and the official who gave the order almost pissed himself in fright. He immediately knelt down and kowtowed in apology. Yupinyan indifferently waved his hand. His cold gaze softened when he saw the old ancestor's aged face. He then looked at Yusiyu, Mama, and the others to the side, before finally stopping on that delicate and beautiful face. It could be seen that she had deliberately dressed up today. Her hair was piled up like clouds and combed into an exquisite cross-shaped bun. In the middle of the cross-shaped bun was a blooming peony flower, but her face was even more eye-catching than the peony flower. At this moment, half of her body was leaning out, waving the handkerchief in her hand. The smile on her face was even more beautiful than the winter sun. Yupinyan frowned and waved his hand. She immediately shrank back and obediently leaned against the stone railing. As if she had nowhere to express the joy in her heart, she suddenly kissed her palm and made a pushing gesture. Yupinyan's eyesight was outstanding, so he took in the bright red lipstick mark on her palm. His lips suddenly felt slightly warm. It felt as if she was kissing him through the air, and at the same time it was full of love. Yupinyan's tight lips finally lifted, revealing a smile that was enough to charm all the women in the world. His originally handsome face was shining brightly in the winter sun. The official watched helplessly as a peerless weapon turned into a person of flesh and blood. The pressure in his heart suddenly lessened. Just at this moment, the eunuch who delivered the decree arrived. Yupinyan dismounted from his horse to receive the decree, and immediately led 5,000 soldiers into the capital. The rest of the soldiers remained stationed outside the city. The matriarch came down from the city wall. Her waist was no longer sore, and her legs no longer hurt. She saw that her grandson was in good condition, and all her illnesses were gone. Yuxiang supported her and was about to return to the family hall when they saw a row of soldiers quickly running over. The person in the lead half knelt and said, "Reporting to old madam, the general ordered this lowly one to take you back to Marquis Yongla." Finished speaking, he indicated for them to enter the carriage. Wasn't the Marquis household sealed? The matriarch's eyes shone with surprise. His Majesty has already issued an imperial edict. Once the general returns to the capital, the marquis household will be unsealed. Good, good, good. Let's go. We can finally go home. The matriarch cried tears of joy and impatiently boarded the carriage. Because Emperor Chongkong had sealed off the news, no one in the capital knew that the army was about to return to court. At this time, the third branch's family was jubilantly welcoming guests. Madame Zhuo wore a bright red brocade robe and sat in the main hall. She held Chang Yafu's hand and sized him up. I haven't seen you for a few years. Full has really blossomed like a hibiscus flower. Chang Yafu shyly lowered his head. Yu Pinhong's wife Lu Clan sneered, you call this good looking? Are you all blind? Have you never seen Miss Family Hall? That's what you call beautiful enough to cause the downfall of a city. That day when I met her eyes on the street, I didn't even know how to walk. Someone like Miss Chong is only a so. Moreover, she lost her virginity before marriage. Although Madame Lu's father was only a small village head, without his care, the Yu family's third branch, who couldn't even lift a finger, would have starved to death in Shu County. Who would have thought that once they gained power, they actually planned to marry a second wife for Yu Pinhong? They were simply fooling the Lu clan like fools. If they let Chang Yafu marry into the family, the Lu clan felt that they would be killed sooner or later. It was better to strike first and gain the upper hand. As soon as he said this, the entire hall fell silent. Only when Chang Yafu's sobs could be heard did Duke Jinggua's madam explode with anger and shout, "Where did you hear this? It's simply nonsense. Why would I need to deliberately ask around? Miss Chong has a cinnabar mole on her chest. Who in the capital doesn't know this? Back then, didn't she take the initiative to take off her clothes for a man to see? Why would she be afraid of people talking about it? Look at Miss Chang's figure, it's so romantic. Who knows how she's been nourished every day? She said she went back to her hometown. Who knows which adulterer's house she's hiding in?" The Lu clan was originally a rural village woman. Even the crudest words came out of her mouth. Duke Jinggua's madam was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. She sternly scolded, "You slut, you actually dare to slander my son like this. See if I don't tear your mouth apart." Chapter 133. Madame Zhuo jumped up in fright and ran to the door in a few steps. She grabbed the servant girl who was reporting and anxiously asked, "What did you say? Say it again." "The seal on Marquis Yongla has been lifted. Old Madame has returned to the Fu. It was a group of soldiers who sent her back. They went up and tore off the seal." "How could that be? Didn't they say that the Marquis household was going to be awarded to our master?" "No, the old Madame is our master's mother. If she can return to the Fu, that means our master can return to the Fu. Hurry, 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 hurry and inform our master that the imperial edict has been passed down. Have him go to the Marquis household to take a look." Madame Zhuo was first shocked, then overjoyed. She ordered the servants to run in circles. "Congratulations, younger sister. You've come a long way." Duchess Jinggua barely suppressed her anger and stepped forward with a smile. The members of the Lu clan didn't hide anymore. They lifted their skirts and rushed out, ready to see just how wealthy the legendary Marquis Yongla was, that her parents-in-law and husband still couldn't forget about it after so many years. They even shouted in their dreams that they wanted to inherit the title. Yu Junwei and his son were drinking with Duke Jinggua. When they received the news, they immediately went out to investigate. Sure enough, they saw that Marquis Yongla's main door was wide open. The seal on the door had already been reduced to pieces of scrap paper, blown away by the northern wind. Many servants and soldiers were moving things in and out, looking very busy. The matriarch held Yu Siyu's hand in her left hand, and Yu Xiang's hand in her right hand. She was standing in front of the door, looking up at the gilded plaque hanging in the courtyard. She said in a clear voice, "In a moment, set up a ladder and wipe the dust off the plaque." "Okay." A steward immediately complied and sent someone to bring a ladder. "Mother, why did you tear off the seal? Did His Majesty's imperial edict come down?" Yu Junwei stepped forward to ask. "That's right. The imperial edict came down long ago." The matriarch took out a roll of bright yellow brocade from her sleeve. Yu Junwei's eyes shone brightly, and his breathing was heavy. He struggled to maintain a steady voice as he asked, "I can inherit the title? My position has been restored?" Hong-er's scholarly rank has also been restored? You're dreaming. Yandere is still alive. What title did you inherit? The old lady laughed mockingly. Without waiting for Yu Junwei to speak, Yu Miaoqi, who had come with the Lin clan to watch the show, hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" Yu Siu sneered, "Are you deaf? My big brother is not dead. How can the position of Marquis Yonglu be given to others?" Not only did he not die, but he also flattened the Western imperial court and made a great contribution. Her brother had already entered the palace to meet the emperor, and would return home in the evening. Today, the mansion is holding a family banquet to celebrate Big Brother's birthday. I hope you all will come, Yu Xiang said with a smile. Yu Junwei, Yu Miaoqi, and the others were confused and disoriented by their words, and they felt a chill run down their spines. Yu Pinyin didn't die, so the charges of conspiring with the enemy and plotting a rebellion that had been placed on his head would naturally be dispelled, and his title of nobility would no longer be a problem. That wasn't all. When he was free, everyone who had framed him would receive his most cruel and merciless revenge, just like in the past. Yu Junwei and the others only had to think about it for a moment to feel their liver and guts being torn apart. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan unconsciously hugged each other, their trembling bodies revealing the fear in their hearts. The old lady pinched her granddaughter's wrist and sneered, "What family banquet? Apart from the three of us, who else is a family? Mama, go inform the clan elders. I want to make the decision for Yandere to sever his mother-son relationship with the Lin clan and his sibling relationship with Yu Miaoqi. From now on, we will go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other." When Yu Xiang heard this, he inwardly applauded. Even Yu Siu felt that the old ancestor was decisive and that this was how it should be. "Mother, you can't. Yandere fell from my stomach." The Lin clan screamed mournfully, but Yu Miaoqi didn't make a sound. She knew that she had already gone too far. Not only did she hide the evidence of her crimes in Yu Pinyin's study, she also instructed the Lin clan to help the third branch seize their titles. Her crimes were unforgivable. Even if she had a glib tongue and the ability to distort black and white, the old lady would never believe her again. The third branch's title was gone. Not only that, they would probably have to bear the crime of framing a court official. No, she almost forgot. The ultimate goal of framing Yu Pinyin was to topple the crown prince and help the fourth prince seize the throne. Now that Yu Pinyin had returned to the capital victoriously, the crown prince was naturally safe. The emperor who had orchestrated all of this probably knew everything. However, he had been holding back the entire time. He probably wanted to use this incident to clean up the court. Everyone who had participated in this incident couldn't escape. Not a single person could escape. And if she dissolved her sibling relationship with Yu Pinyin, just the crime of framing a court official would be enough to sentence her to death by 1,000 cuts. Yu Pinyin was never stingy with his own hands when it came to those who provoked him. 3,600 cuts. He wouldn't let the other person die until the last cut was made. His heart was just that ruthless. The more Yu Miaoqi thought about it, the heavier the fear and despair in her heart. It was so heavy that she wanted to scream on the spot. She bit the tip of her tongue and ordered herself to remain calm. She told herself that her benefactor was still here. He was so wise and skilled in strategizing. He would definitely have a way to turn the situation around. She suddenly remembered the scene of her wearing the phoenix robe. Only then did her panicked heart slowly calm down. When Yu Pinyin led the army through the streets, many of the Yu family's clansmen saw him. In the past, the clansmen had been bribed by the third branch to help the third branch fight for the title and wantonly bully the orphans and widows. After Yu Pinyin gained power, he took revenge on them one by one. The remaining clansmen didn't receive any help from him. As a result, the clansmen were quite critical of him. If it weren't for his monstrous power, he would have been expelled from the clan long ago. Previously, when Yu Pinyin was in trouble and the third branch had a chance to rise, the clansmen rushed to spread the news. They were greatly relieved and helped the third branch establish relations. They only hoped that after the third branch had a meteoric rise, they would also be able to get a share of the profits. Now that they saw that not only did Yu Pinyin not die, he even led 1,000,000 soldiers to victory and returned to the court. The shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. In order to appease Yu Pinyin, They had to do something quickly. The clansmen all thought to themselves. Because of this, when the matriarch sent someone to invite them, the clan elders immediately rushed to the ancestral hall. Yandere has always been loyal and devoted to the emperor. How could he collude with the enemy to usurp the throne? Now that he has destroyed the western continent and pacified the chaos in Xizang, his contributions have been seen by the emperor. As early as 10 days ago, he had already issued an imperial edict to return Marquis Yongla to Yan. Clan elders, please take a look. The matriarch spread out the bright yellow brocade on the table. The clan elders hurriedly knelt down and said, "Long live the emperor." Although I don't have any concrete evidence, I know very well who put the secret letter in Yandere's study. The matriarch coldly glanced at Yu Miaoqi and continued, "The Marquis family is in dire straits. As a family we should help each other and support each other. However, the family is unfortunate. There are two traitors who are worse than beasts. They actually helped an outsider to slander and frame Yandere. At that time the news of Yandere's defeat and death had already spread. It is said that the dead should be respected. One of them is Yandere's younger sister, and the other is Yandere's biological mother. However, for the sake of glory, splendor and wealth, they intended to step on Yandere's bones to ascend. Their conduct is simply intolerable. Let me ask everyone, in all these years, have you ever seen such heartless and unscrupulous people? The clan members present were all ashamed by the matriarch's question. Even if the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi were helping the third branch, Yu Junwei and the others still felt that such people were worse than beasts, just as the matriarch said. They had long been distracted by the news of Yu Pinyan's return to the capital. They only wanted to break up the clan meeting as soon as possible, then pack up their things and escape to the land of Shu. However, they were detained on the ground by the soldiers brought by the matriarch and could not move. Ordinary people could not understand the feeling of burning with anxiety. Yu Miaoqi and the members of the Lin clan knelt down in the hall. One of them had a numb expression, while the other was crying so hard that she almost fainted. The matriarch took a sip of ginseng tea and continued, "I've thought about it over and over again. Such heartless and unscrupulous people can't stay in the family. Sooner or later, they will cause our family to be ruined. Therefore, I summoned all the clan elders to be witnesses and sever all ties with them. If you don't agree, when His Majesty starts to clean up the imperial court, he will inevitably find them and the third branch. You have been in close contact with them recently, so you may be implicated and end up with your heads separated from your bodies." The last sentence was like a bolt of lightning that struck the clan members' heads. Before the clan elders could speak, someone shouted, "Sever ties, quickly sever ties. Not only do we have to sever ties with these two, we also have to sever ties with the third branch. Exterminate the clan, we must exterminate the clan. Otherwise, when His Majesty investigates, it will be a great crime that will result in the execution of 9 generations of the clan." The clan elders were drenched in cold sweat and hurriedly nodded. The third branch's entire family was paralyzed on the ground like mud. Only the members of the Lu clan broke free from the soldiers' grip and shouted themselves hoarse, "I want to divorce Yu Pinhong. He wants to divorce his wife and remarry, so I want to divorce. Old madam, please uphold justice for me." Although she was coarse, she was a tactful person. As soon as she knelt at the feet of the matriarch, who had the most authority. The matriarch closed her eyes and ignored her. On the other hand, Yu Xiang found it quite interesting and smiled. "All right, I'll let you two divorce. Get up. This is my family's matter. What right do you have to make the decision?" Yu Pinhong asked, flustered and exasperated. "Just because I'm the knife and you're the fish on the chopping block. Just because I'm sitting here and you're lying there. Just because I'm the ruler and you're the sinner. Is that enough?" Yu Xiang stroked her freshly applied nail polish, her tone light and unhurried. Yu Pinhong was mute. His hands were fiercely twisted by the soldiers. It was so painful that he couldn't even cry out. The members of the Lu clan were overjoyed and repeatedly kowtowed to Yu Xiang. By the time she quietly hid in the crowd, the clan elders had already finished writing the divorce papers. They ordered all the clan members to put their handprints on the papers and send them to the yamen for review. If the yamen passed the review and prepared a file, it would be posted on the bulletin board for everyone in the capital to see. From then on, Yu Miaoqi the Lin clan, and the third branch would no longer have anything to do with the clan. Yu Pinyin had no way of knowing what was going on at home. At this time, he was kneeling in front of the palace hall to report to Emperor Chong Kong. Emperor Chong Kong praised the generals. When they stood up and retreated to the side, he suddenly spoke with a cold expression, one word at a time, colluding with foreign enemies, plotting to usurp the throne, treason and heresy. Where did these crimes come from? It's a bunch of nonsense. Someone go invite the crown prince and the prime minister. Invite all the suspended officials to come to the palace hall. Zhen wants to properly clean up this muddy court. Chapter 134. When the fifth prince and the sixth prince thought of their recent actions, their faces turned deathly pale. Large drops of cold sweat flowed down their cheeks and hair and flowed into their clothes. The crown prince had always been filial and had both ability and integrity. As long as he waited patiently, the dragon throne would be his sooner or later. Why would he need to use force to abdicate? They knew that something was wrong and even suspected that it was done by each other, but they never thought of pleading for the crown prince. Instead, they took the opportunity to add insult to injury, and wanted to kill the crown prince and the young imperial grandson. They gathered their henchmen and stirred up chaos in the court. They all dreamed of ascending to the throne, but they never thought that their father had already seen their ugly behavior and remembered it in his heart. Yu Pinyin had returned and brought back hundreds of thousands of soldiers. If they made any strange movements, they would probably die without a complete corpse. At this moment, an indescribable regret spread in their hearts. They hated themselves for being blinded by power and forgot how terrifying their father was. As they waited for the cruel fate to come, they were full of admiration and envy for the silent fourth prince. It was the fourth prince who understood. From beginning to end, he stood on the crown prince's side and pleaded for mercy for the crown prince at every court meeting. He was loyal, calm and filial. Presumably, their father would be very pleased to see this. When this matter was over, the fourth prince would be a prince who ruled over tens of thousands of people, and they would most likely be demoted to commoners. The fifth prince and the sixth prince were like defeated roosters, standing in the hall with their heads down. The fourth prince stood next to the two. Other than his face being slightly pale, there was nothing strange about him. The crown prince and Xianghua had changed into their court robes and slowly walked over. Their expressions were calm and collected. Behind them was a group of dragon scale guard holding steel swords. Embroidered on their official robes was a ferocious yazi, but the color was not the usual dark red. Instead, it was the color of a blood pool in hell. This was a type of official robe that the civil and military officials had never seen before. For a moment, they didn't know where these people came from. Were they the dragon scale guard? Only Ao Ping, who was standing behind the fourth prince, was shocked. He had long heard that the dragon scale guard was divided into two units, one in the light and one in the dark. However, he had never seen the members of the dark unit after being placed in an important position by the emperor, so he thought it was just a rumor. Only after seeing him today did he realize that it was not a rumor in the marketplace. It was just that the emperor had never trusted him. Didn't he see the dragon scale guard at the front of the hall nod slightly at Yu Pinyin? It was obvious that they already knew each other. The emperor's trust in Yu Pinyin far exceeded his own, and even the fourth prince's imagination. Ao Ping tightened his grip on the hilt of his sword, and a determined expression appeared on his face. However, he saw the fourth prince turn to look at him and shake his head without a trace. Now that things had come to this, there was no point in resisting. The front and back of the palace hall had probably been ambushed by countless experts of the dark sect. The ministers who had agreed to rise up with him had either really sided with him, or were part of the trap set by his imperial father and the crown prince. The answer was obvious. You think you're a hero, but in the eyes of others you're just a clown. The saddest thing in the world is this. The fourth prince suddenly felt very tired. He lowered his head and silently waited for his fate. Like him, the fifth prince and the sixth prince also accepted their fate. However, when the dragon scale guard swarmed up and took the fourth prince away without touching them, the shock in their hearts was simply indescribable. The officials who had been won over by them were also dumbfounded and momentarily stunned on the spot. The one who had truly crossed the line was the fourth prince. Although the actions of the two princes and their henchmen were punishable, if they were killed one by one, it would shake the throne of the country. It was better to spare their lives. On the contrary, it would serve as a deterrent to the officials, purge the court, and stabilize the people's hearts. From then on, for the next few decades, it was likely that no one would dare to do anything else. Emperor Chongkong did not explain all of this. He only waved his hand and had the fourth prince and his henchmen taken away. When he spoke again, he was extremely tired. "I'm tired and need to rest. From today onwards, the crown prince will temporarily be in charge of the country. No matter whether it's a big or small matter, you can report it to the crown prince without asking for my permission. Court is dismissed. Beloved minister, you please stay." The officials who were lucky enough to escape hurriedly knelt and saluted, saying, "Long live the crown prince." In Yangxin Palace Hall, Emperor Chongkang's desk was filled with many documents, all of which contained evidence of the fourth prince's crimes. Just the names of the people involved in the case alone was a thick stack. He was only in his early 20s this year, but as early as 14 years old, he had begun to plan for today's events. The number of people he had roped in, both openly and secretly, was innumerable. If it weren't for the fact that he had secretly observed him for several months and unearthed all of the clues he had planted, even if he was executed, it would still leave behind a huge hidden danger. Emperor Chongkong threw away the documents and let out a long sigh. It was a pity for this son of his. If he could use his talents on the right path, he would definitely become a virtuous official. If he didn't betray the interests of the country for his own selfish desires, perhaps he could be spared his life. After sighing, Emperor Chongkong looked at the calm crown prince sitting next to him, then looked at the tall and straight figure of his trusted subordinate. Emperor Chongkang's bad mood slightly improved. He smiled and said, "Yifeng, you just came back from Xizang, so you should rest for a while. However, the court is in turmoil right now and everyone is in a state of panic. The crown prince and I can only rely on you. The matter of arresting and interrogating the remnants of the fourth prince's party will be left to you. When the dust has settled, I will reward you greatly." Yu Pinyin half knelt and cupped his hands. Reporting to the emperor, "Can this humble official use military merits and rewards in exchange for a decree from you?" "What decree?" Emperor Chongkong raised his eyebrows. This was the first time Yu Pinyin had asked him for a decree. "A decree to grant a marriage." "Oh? Which girl have you taken a fancy to?" Emperor Chongkang's body slightly leaned forward, his turbid eyes shining with interest. Even the mature and prudent crown prince couldn't help but be surprised. Yu Pinyin didn't like women, much less men. The common people of the capital all said that he was a cold-blooded and heartless monster. However, they didn't expect that this monster would also fall in love, and that he would seriously ask the emperor for a favor. Yu Pinyin's eyes softened, and he said firmly, "I beg the emperor to grant a marriage between me and Xiang'er." The document in the crown prince's hand fell to the ground with a clatter. Emperor Chongkong was dumbfounded, and it took him a long time to regain his senses. Not only did he not feel that it was absurd, he even clapped his hands and laughed. No wonder that girl was willing to risk her life to find you in Xizang. It turns out that the two of you already have deep feelings for each other. Yes, deep feelings have already been planted, and it's hard for me to extricate myself, Yu Pinyin admitted without hesitation. Emperor Chongkong was a man who was about to die. After so many twists and turns, he had even seen through life and death. How could he be bothered by these mundane matters? It was rare to find someone who was infatuated with love. Since this pair of son and daughter had feelings for each other, why couldn't he grant them their wish? Don't talk about sibling incest. Right now, everyone in the capital knew that Yu Xiang wasn't of the family Yu bloodline. As long as the two of them were willing, who could stop them? Asking for a decree was only so that Yu Xiang could straighten his back and not be criticized by others in the future. This kind of protectiveness was very moving. Emperor Chongkong laughed and waved his hand. "Help me and the crown prince clean up the imperial hall. In the future you will be rewarded, and you will be granted a marriage. We definitely won't treat you unfairly." Yu Pinyin was overjoyed. He bid farewell to the two and left the palace to return home. The matriarch had just severed ties with the mother and daughter of the Lin clan when she saw many dragon scale guards dressed in black official robes rush into the family ancestral hall. Without a word, they arrested the mother and daughter of the Lin clan and the third branch. The person in the lead glanced at the document on the table and raised his eyebrows. This official will take this document to the Ministry of Revenue for you to declare. Fortunately, you were smart enough. Otherwise, we wouldn't have just arrested these few people today. After he finished speaking, he personally went to help the matriarch and restrained his hostility. Old matriarch, it's a mess here. This humble one will send you back. The matriarch looked at his black official robes and was rather confused. The embroidery on his body was indeed Yazzie, but why didn't the color match? Were these people really her grandson's subordinates? That person didn't explain. Instead, he repeatedly pleaded with her with a respectful attitude. Only then did the matriarch let down her guard and leave under the protection of a group of guards. When they were all gone, the Yu clan clansmen struggled to stand up and shout, "Oh my God, that was so close. If we were a step late, our entire clan would have been arrested and sent to the imperial prison." Old matriarch's foresight is still far and clear. All the clan elders nodded in agreement, feeling rather scared. As for those who helped the third branch to redress their grievances, they were so scared that they fell ill and couldn't recover. As soon as Yu Xiang left the ancestral hall, she was brought back to the family Shen by people sent by Shen Yuanqi. In the evening, she received the matriarch's invitation, inviting them to the prefecture Yu for a banquet. Yu Xiang took a flower petal bath and put on a charming peach blossom makeup. She wore a pink cloud butterfly dress and also applied a few drops of rose essential oil behind her ears, neck and wrists. Her entire person was tender, delicate and fragrant. When people saw her, they couldn't help but want to stick their eyes to her body. Shen Yuanqi was originally very fond of her, but when he thought about how his younger sister dressed up so splendidly just to meet Yu Pinyin, his mood became very sour. He restrained himself from locking the little lass at home. He pointed at the wheelchair and asked, "Why are you still in the wheelchair? Didn't you say that your legs have healed a long time ago?" "Master Kuhui said that my bones haven't fully healed yet. It's cold in winter, so if I walk too much, it's easy to trigger arthritis. I still need to sit in the wheelchair often," Yu Xiang said, pretending to be serious. When Shen Yuanqi heard this, he felt very distressed and hurriedly ordered people to bring a thick blanket to cover her. He felt that it was inappropriate, so he put 2 hot water cups on her legs. Lulu, who was behind them, curled her lips and thought, "Miss, if you want Master Ho to openly hug you, just say so. It's not kind of you to pretend to be sick to scare the young master." When the group arrived at Marquis Yongla, they saw Yu Pinyin, who was wearing a black robe, already standing at the gate and waiting for them. When he saw the little lass sitting in the wheelchair, his cold and stiff face suddenly bloomed with a gentle smile. He bypassed Shen Yuanqi, who was cupping his hands in greeting, and directly took the little lass into his arms. He even held her buttocks and weighed them. He said discontentedly, "You've lost weight. Did you not eat properly? I missed you so much that I didn't have the appetite to eat or drink. Naturally, I lost weight." Yu Xiang leaned over and whispered in his ear, making him laugh loudly. Shen Yuanqi gnashed his teeth as he watched from the side. However, because Yu Pinyin had just returned home safely, he didn't want to embarrass him. He could only fake a smile and say, "Official Yu, you're not inviting us in." Chapter 135. The banquet was very sumptuous, and they even opened several jars of imperial wine. The two families had gone through trials and tribulations together, and had already formed a deep friendship. Now that the bitterness was over, they naturally had endless things to say. Yu Xiang secretly stepped on her brother's feet a few times, then used her fingertips to poke his thigh. However, she pretended to be very serious. She raised her wine cup and said, "Come, for our family reunion, let's all drink up." After saying that, she downed the cup in one gulp. Yu Pinyin looked at her with sparkling eyes and also downed his cup in one gulp. The matriarch and the others responded one after another. Gradually they became excited. They toasted each other and drank all the jars of wine. Yu Xiang loved to drink but was not good at it. After a few cups of wine she became dizzy. However, she was very good at drinking. She neither cried nor fell asleep. She only rested her cheeks on her hands and looked at her brother beside her with a smile. Her fiery eyes were full of love that could not be concealed. Yupinyan was distracted by her gaze. He wished he could drive everyone out and then take the little girl into his arms and dote on her. The matriarch looked at her granddaughter's silly appearance and smiled with nostalgia. Xiang'er is drunk. Once she's drunk, she doesn't recognize anyone except her brother. Oh, that's right, she also loves to sing. I still remember that year on the reunion night, I got her drunk and asked her to sing. She could sing alone as well as an opera troupe. She could easily sing whatever was ugly. It could be said that her skills were extraordinary. I know that she doesn't recognize people when she's drunk, but I didn't know that she also loves to sing. Shen Yuanqi suddenly became interested and probed, Xiang'er, sing a song? Yu Xiang looked at him lazily, then looked at her brother beside her. She raised her orchid fingers and sang, the birds on the tree are in pairs, the green water and green mountains bring smiles, you plow the fields for me to weave cloth, you carry water for me to water the garden, although the cold cave is broken, it can shelter us from the wind and rain, husband and wife love each other bitter and sweet, from now on, we no longer have to suffer the pain of slavery, husband and wife return home together. She skillfully switched between male and female voices. As she sang, she hung the song around her elder brother's neck and repeated the line, a husband and wife's love is bitter and sweet several times. Yupinyan had long discovered one thing. Once his sister got drunk, her biggest hobby was not to daydream or sing, but to flirt with him. He had lost count of how many times it had been, but the sudden joy and wild love were as strong as the first time. He held his sister's slender waist and naturally placed her on his lap. After Yu Xiang finished singing, she mumbled, brother, I want a fruity wine-flavored kiss. She pouted her red lips as she spoke. Yupinyan wanted to skin her alive, but he knew that this was not the right place. He pinched her lips and coaxed, be good. I'll give it to you after dinner. No, I want it now. I want it now. Yu Xiang hung around Yupinyan's neck and swayed from side to side. She wanted to kiss his thin lips, but she missed the target several times. She could only cry out unwillingly. Tao Hong and Lu Lu both held their foreheads and could not bear to watch. Old Madame Fu did not know whether to laugh or cry. Yu Xiu felt that it was an eye-opener, but she also felt shy. She turned her head away and tried to hold back her laughter. Shen Yuanqi wanted to beat up Yupinyan for abducting his sister, but he forced a smile on his face and said gently, Xiang'er is drunk. I'll take her home now. No, I haven't seen my brother for a long time. Let me see him properly. Yu Xiang flatly refused. How long has it been? It's only been a few days. Xiang'er, be good. Come down quickly. Shen Yuanqi wanted to tear his sister apart. Just as he reached out his hand, Yupinyan brushed it away and glared at him coldly. A few days? Haven't you heard that one day apart feels like 3 autumns? Let me count, I haven't seen my brother for a few autumns. She stretched out 5 fingers and bent them one by one. She said in distress, 3 autumns, 6 autumns, 9 autumns, 12 autumns. I can't count anymore. 2 lifetimes have passed. Shen Yuanqi's face turned green. You see, you could no longer support herself. She leaned on the table and laughed. She never knew that Yu Xiang was so funny when she was drunk. Old Madame Fu also laughed uncontrollably and almost fell off the stool. The little girl's confession was so passionate and sincere that Yupinyan could no longer hold back. He picked her up and walked towards the side room. Shen Yuanqi hurriedly chased after them, but was stopped by old Madame Fu. She said bluntly, Lord Shen, don't chase after them. I'm afraid that they've already privately agreed to marry each other. Come on, let's hurry up and choose an auspicious date for their marriage. Shen Yuanqi understood that a grown girl could not be kept at home. If she stayed, she would become enemies. He had no choice but to sit down and discuss with the old lady. Yupinyan hurriedly returned to the room and placed the dizzy little girl on the bed. She licked her lips impatiently and struggled to take off her smock. She stretched out her hand towards her brother. Brother, we haven't seen each other for 2 lifetimes. Why don't you come over and kiss me and hug me? I missed you so much. Yupinyan lowered his head and stared at her for a long time with the tip of his nose pressed against hers. He chuckled and sucked on her bright red lips. The two of them hugged each other tightly and only reluctantly separated when they were about to suffocate. A kiss that tastes like fruit wine. It's so fragrant and sweet. Yu Xiang narrowed her eyes and savored the taste. Her satisfied appearance amused Yu Pinyin. He found that as long as the little girl was by his side, his originally stagnant heart would be filled with joy. He stopped laughing and his eyes deepened. He lowered his head and kissed her again. However, he heard a shout from outside the door. Yandere, old madam, and I have set a few good dates. You can come and choose. Let's quickly get married. It was said to be picking a date, but in reality, it was to disturb his good fortune. However, that was his future brother-in-law, so he had to endure. Yu Pinyin secretly gritted his teeth and used his greatest self-control to pull off the little girl who was clinging onto him and stuffed her into the quilt. He pecked her slightly pouted red lips. After walking a few steps, he felt reluctant and turned around to peck her lips again. Only then did he push the door open. The usually empty and gloomy prison was now overcrowded. The fourth prince was locked up alone in the corner of the prison. His henchmen and their families were locked up in the outer cells. As more and more people came in and out of the dragon scale guard, the prison was almost full. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan were mixed in with the families of the guilty officials. There were constant cries of injustice coming from all around them. The red-clothed dragon scale guards were all replaced by black-clothed dragon scale guards. Their physiques were sturdier, their faces were colder, and their temperaments were more ferocious. Their hands were constantly on the hilts of their swords, as if they would cut anyone in half if they even slightly touched the prison door. These people were all unfamiliar faces, but the strong bloodlust in their eyes showed that they were already an extremely valiant elite force. They were the trump card that Emperor Chongkong kept in the palm of his hand and never used lightly. The fourth prince lowered his head and smiled bitterly. He secretly thought that his loss was not unjust. "Fourth prince, why are you here?" Yu Miaoqi squeezed out of the crowd with great difficulty and saw the fourth prince locked up in the deepest part of the prison. She cried out in disbelief. "Then where should this prince be?" The fourth prince asked calmly. Shouldn't you be in the throne room? You are so wise and powerful, so how did you fall into this kind of situation?" Yu Miaoqi felt as if her heart was about to jump out of her throat. If even the fourth prince was in here, who else in the world could save her? How did this prince fall into this kind of situation? This prince also wants to know. Why don't you help this prince ask your elder brother? It was unknown what the fourth prince thought of, but he shook his head and laughed in spite of himself. Yu Miaoqi, this prince originally thought that he was the most pitiful and stupid person in the world, but after seeing you, I feel much better. This prince only tried to tempt you with benefits, and you helped this prince frame your own elder brother. Who would have thought that without Yu Pinyin's protection, you would not even be as good as the dust on the ground? Your temperament is cold, ungrateful, and you only care about benefits. How could this prince take a liking to someone like you? Those promises from back then were just empty words. Yu Miaoqi seemed to have suffered a great blow, and she fell limp to the ground. The Lin clan crawled over with difficulty. He wanted to hug her, but when he remembered that he had fallen into this state because of her instigation, he slowly withdrew his outstretched hand. "You're from the Lin clan? You're Yu Miaoqi?" It was unknown which family's madam recognized the two of them, but she said with a bit of schadenfreude, "One of you is Yu Pinyin's mother, and the other is Yu Pinyin's little sister. You should have enjoyed endless glory and wealth in this life, so why did you have to be so stupid as to oppose him? But this is also good. We have Yu Pinyin's blood relatives to accompany us in the Yellow Springs, so it's not a loss." "What Yellow Springs? Don't speak nonsense. Big brother is only scaring me and my mother. He definitely won't abandon us." Yu Miaoqi shouted fiercely. "I'm not scaring you. This prince has already severed all ties with you too. Your life and death has nothing to do with this prince." It was unknown when Yu Pinyin had appeared in the dark corridor, but he slowly walked to the flickering candlelight. His incomparably handsome face emitted a jade-like radiance. His long and narrow eyes slightly narrowed as he emotionlessly looked at the mother and daughter at his feet. He wore a black official's robe with a sinister yazzi embroidered in the center of his chest. His hand was pressed against the scabbard of his embroidered spring saber. His seemingly lazy but actually vigilant posture made his baleful aura even more threatening. Yu Miaoqi was frostbitten by the cold aura emitted from his body. She quickly retreated, but she didn't forget to defend herself. No matter how you sever all ties, I am still your blood-related little sister. Who in this world would kill their own blood-related little sister? It's simply intolerable by the heavens. Who in this world would harm their adoptive father, kill their adoptive mother, slander their adoptive brother, frame their blood-related older sister, frame their blood-related older brother, and destroy their family? If we're talking about heavenly justice, you should have been struck by lightning a long time ago. Even if you went through the 18 layers of hell, you still wouldn't be able to wash away the sins on your body. Only by falling into the path of the beast for all of your lives would you be able to make up for it. Yu Miaoqi, don't talk to me about blood-related kinship. The one who first abandoned blood-related kinship was you, not me. Today's karma is all the karma you sowed back then. Just bear with it. After he finished speaking, he strode towards the prison where the male prisoners were locked up, leaving behind Yu Miaoqi, who was wailing in despair. Hearing Yu Pinyan's words, the female prisoners all distanced themselves from her. They had never seen such a heartless and unscrupulous person in their lives. Yu Pinyan stopped in front of the prison and asked in a low voice, "Who is Sun Mingzhi?" The prisoners all hid in the innermost corner. When they saw his thumb constantly moving the scabbard, causing the blade to emit an ear-piercing buzzing sound, they looked at each other. Finally they found Sun Mingzhi and pushed him out. Yu Pinyan had a smile on his face, but his tone was extremely cold. "I heard that you wanted to take Xiang'er as your concubine? You even said that if Xiang'er fell into your hands, you would make her beg for death?" "You Commander Yu, I was wrong, please spare me. I was stupid, I didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth." Sun Mingzhi knelt on the ground and kowtowed desperately. His father rushed over to protect him, while his mother wailed miserably in the opposite prison. Chapter 136. The criminal officials who had rebelled with the fourth prince were either beheaded or exiled. Outside the Meridian Gate, there were people dying every day. The thick layer of blood could not be cleaned up. It had already formed dark brown hard lumps on the execution platform, emitting a kind of fishy smell that made people retreat. Many aristocratic families were implicated and declined one after another. Many new nobles quickly rose up and stood in the court. Under the control of Emperor Chongkong and the Crown Prince, the change of power was carried out in an orderly manner. In the end, the fourth prince was sentenced to be beheaded. This drama of seizing the throne hadn't truly begun before it came to an end. The fifth prince and the sixth prince were both stripped of their titles. Although they weren't demoted to commoners, they weren't far off. 2 months later, Emperor Chongkong announced his abdication and officially handed over the country to the Crown Prince. He also felt that he had killed and seriously injured the throne, so he dealt leniently with the families of the officials involved. Those who weren't deeply involved were either sold or exiled. At least their lives were saved. If not for this, based on the crimes these people had committed, their entire families would have been slaughtered. The blood at the entrance of the market might have drowned the legs and stomachs of the pedestrians. However, Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan weren't among these people who were dealt with leniently. When the two of them saw the last meal delivered by the jailers, they were so scared that their souls almost left their bodies. They leaned against the prison door and kept begging for mercy. The Lin clan cried until their throats were hoarse. Only then did they truly realize that they had no way to live. She sat in a daze for a moment, then picked up the last meal and ate it very seriously and carefully. Yu Miaoqi looked at the pitch-black corridor outside the prison door, then looked at the despairing and numb Lin clan. She said sternly, "This is the last meal. You can't eat it." "Why can't you eat it? Don't tell me you're still hoping that someone will come and save us?" The Lin clan raised their heads. For the first time, they looked at their daughter with unfamiliar and cold eyes. When she knew that death was coming, she finally woke up from this terrifying dream. She turned her head and looked back at her former self. All that was left was a heart full of absurdity and not knowing whether to laugh or cry. What had she done? For such a heartless and selfish daughter, She had abandoned her mother-in-law, her son, and her status as a Junjia's wife. But what did she get in the end? There was only his daughter's resentment and scolding and this bowl of rice. She deserved to die, so why didn't she eat it? What she was most afraid of now was not death, but how she would meet her husband in the Yellow Springs. When he asked him whether he had taken good care of his son, whether he had taken good care of his mother-in-law, and whether he had established the Marquis family, how should he answer him? Could it be that I have ignored my son and mother-in-law for more than 10 years? Not only that, I even joined forces with my daughter to almost destroy the Marquis Yongla? After hearing what she said, the Junjia would probably kill her first. So absurd, so laughable, so stupid. What was he thinking back then to walk step by step into the abyss until he was beyond redemption? The head of the Lin clan spat out the chicken bone in his mouth and turned to look at his daughter, who was crying out for her innocence. Slowly, a bleak smile appeared on his face. "Grandmother, have you come to save us?" Granddaughter knows she was wrong. From now on, granddaughter will definitely listen to you and won't cause any more trouble. Grandmother, please forgive granddaughter. Yu Miaoqi shouted emotionally when she saw the people walking over from the end of the corridor. She kept calling them grandmother and granddaughter, constantly reminding the matriarch of their blood relationship. The head of the Lin clan threw his bowl of rice and threw himself to the side of the cell door to look out. With tears streaming down his face, he asked, "Mother, have you come to send us off?" "Mother, daughter-in-law knows she was wrong. Daughter-in-law has let you down, let Yandere down, and let Junjia down. Daughter-in-law deserves to die." The matriarch was very surprised by the Lin clan's sudden repentance. She couldn't help but stare at her, and finally sighed. "So what if you know you were wrong? Unfortunately, it's all too late." Then she looked at the jailer and waved her hand slightly. "Let them out." The Lin clan was dumbfounded, but Yu Miaoqi was wild with joy. She impatiently squeezed out of the half-open cell door and cried, "Granddaughter, thanks grandmother for saving my life. From now on, granddaughter will definitely be filial to you." The matriarch took the lead to walk out with Mama Ma's support. She sneered, "I don't dare accept your kindness. I'm afraid that one day, you'll suddenly stab a knife into my heart. I put down my old face to plead for mercy on your behalf only to shut the mouths of the people in the world. No matter what, Yandere can't bear the crime of killing his own family. In the end, he still has to be a human, unlike you, who have already been reduced to animals." The Lin clan's footsteps became stiffer and stiffer. She felt that rather than leaving this place alive, it would be better to die on the guillotine. She already had no face to see her son. Yu Miaoqi obediently followed behind the matriarch. She thought to herself that she could just let her scold them. Once the matriarch finished venting her anger, she would take her back and become Marquis Yongla again. Oh no, Dukufus Demas. Even the history books would turn over a new page. Her life could also start anew. However, when they reached the door, 2 soldiers raised their swords and halberds to welcome them. They respectfully asked, "Old matriarch, are these the 2 people?" "Old matriarch, please be at ease. This time, we will definitely send them back to Shua City alive." The matriarch nodded. Wan Qiu, who had been standing beside the carriage, walked over and threw the 2 parcels in his hands at the feet of the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi. Shua City was the most famous place of exile in the Great Han Dynasty. It was a barren wasteland with no signs of human habitation. Its vile living environment made even the locals want to escape, not to mention the exiled prisoners. After going there, no one could set foot on their homeland alive. Yu Miaoqi seemed to have realized something. Her voice trembled as she asked, "Grandmother, didn't you come to take me back?" I am your biological granddaughter." Rather than being exiled to Shua City, she would rather die in Shangjing. She absolutely could not be reduced to a lowly slave, who had to suffer the hardships of farming every day. She was a born noble. Don't forget, we have already severed our relationship. You wanted to kill your big brother and destroy the foundation that the family you had built with the blood and lives of several generations. Yet, I am still willing to ask the emperor to save your life. I have already been extremely benevolent to you. Go far away. Don't let me see you again." The matriarch waved her hand. When she turned around, her back seemed so bleak and exhausted. Yu Miaoqi wanted to chase after her but was restrained by the soldiers. She continuously shouted and cursed, trying to use her blood ties and morals to force the matriarch to submit. However, all she got in return was the ridicule of passers-by. She was so heartless, yet she scolded others for being heartless. It was simply laughable. For the matriarch to save her life at the last moment, she could be considered a living Buddha. The members of the Lin clan picked up the bundle on the ground. They ignored their battered and exhausted daughter, and walked towards the city gate under the escort of the soldiers. To be honest, she did not have to return to the prefecture to face her son and mother-in-law. Her heart was more relaxed and relieved. If being exiled could wash away her sins, then she would die outside the pass. As early as a month ago, Yu Xiu had already left the house. Today was the day that Yu Xiang married into the family. She wore a bright red wedding dress and sat in front of the dressing table looking at herself in the mirror. She was very satisfied with her bright and beautiful makeup. As if she felt that her lipstick was a little smudged, she used her fingernails to smooth it out bit by bit, and then gently pursed her lips. The matriarch outside saw that there was no movement in the room for a long time and loudly reminded, the bride should be crying. Today is my big day. I don't even have enough time to smile, how can I cry? Isn't this making things difficult for me? As Yu Xiang spoke, she straightened the phoenix coronet on her head, and used her fingertips to push the bead curtain in front of her forehead, making it jingle. She giggled. Tao Hong nodded in agreement. The corners of Lulu's mouth twitched. The matriarch standing outside the door looked at Lord Shen with a pale face. This family Shen's girl was indeed extraordinary. She was really shameless. Shen Yuanqi closed his eyes and threatened, Xiang'er, if you don't cry today, we won't hold the wedding. Stay at home and accompany Big Brother for a few more years. This damned girl, she couldn't wait to marry into the family. You. Don't, Big Brother. I'll cry, okay? When Yu Xiang heard this, she immediately began to sob. However, this made Shen Yuanqi's face even more green. Yu Pinyin rode a tall horse and led 8 palanquins to pick up his wife. There were a total of 120 sets of dowry, which were lined up from the east to the west of the city. The scene was very grand. Although the two were originally brother and sister, the new emperor personally wrote the edict for the marriage, so no one dared to say anything. After the couple bowed to each other, the newlyweds entered the bridal chamber. When Yu Pinyin lifted the veil, the noisy bridal chamber was silent for a long time, and the sound of people gasping rose and fell. Such a beautiful and devastatingly beautiful woman had been by his side for 15 or 16 years. Only a fool wouldn't be tempted. Yu Pinyin's face turned cold. Only then did the crowd come to their senses and quickly move their gazes away from the bride's face. The matriarch picked up a bowl of dumplings and fed it to the bride. Yu Xiang got up early in the morning to dress up and didn't eat anything. At this time she was very hungry and ate 3 or 4 dumplings in a row. When she saw the matriarch move the spoon away, she glared at her with dissatisfaction. The matriarch suppressed the twitching corners of her mouth and asked, Are these dumplings raw? Yu Xiang glanced at her brother with a smile and answered, Raw, one is more raw than the other. What do you mean by one is more raw than the other? You might as well say one by one. Shen Yuanqi was secretly annoyed, but he also didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The people around him didn't hold back and laughed. Yu Pinyin only narrowed his eyes and looked at the little girl with a few sparks in his eyes. The two of them tied their hair and drank the nuptial wine. Yu Pinyin only had time to caress his wife's cheek before he was surrounded by his subordinates and went out to drink. Yu Xiang chased after him and said, Don't get drunk, which made them laugh again. When everyone left, Tao Hong and Lulu quickly took off the phoenix coronet on their master's head and helped her wash up. Miss, quickly put on your clothes. After you're done, come over and eat something. Tao Hong called out. Yu Xiang only wore a bright red tutu with mandarin ducks playing in water on her upper body, and a pair of bloomers of the same color on her lower body. Because the fabric was too thin, it didn't cover what should be covered. Instead, it had a kind of hazy beauty that attracted people to explore. Her figure was originally graceful, and her skin was as smooth and white as milk. When she was lying on her side on the bed, the strong contrast between the snow white and bright red was simply breathtaking. Tao Hong and Lulu couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva, and their cheeks suddenly burned red. What do you want to eat? I just ate a few dumplings and it's enough. If I eat more, my stomach will bulge out. It won't look good. Yuxiang waved her hand and gathered the scattered longans, red dates, peanuts and other things on the bed into a pile. She smiled and said, I'll peel a few peanuts and eat them. The peanuts don't take up much space. Then you should at least put on your undergarments so that you won't catch a cold. Lulu picked up the bright red undergarments that his master had carelessly thrown on the ground. I'm not wearing them. It's already the end of July. Don't you think it's hot? Do I look good like this? Do I look beautiful? Do you want to pounce on me when you see me? She asked as she lifted the hem of her doo-doo, revealing half of her plump, white and smooth bosom. Tao Hong and Lulu's eyes widened. They hurriedly covered their slightly itchy noses and turned their backs. Yuxiang covered her mouth and chuckled, "Done. I'm very satisfied with your answers. This is the effect I wanted. Quickly come over and eat some peanuts. If your son-in-law still hasn't returned in an hour, help me go to the front door and urge him." What kind of bride urges the groom to return to the room? Miss, you don't know shame. Lulu really wanted to kneel down in front of his master. On the wedding night, we should do some shameful things. Why would I know shame? Yuxiang covered her mouth and chuckled. Tao Hong and Lulu were speechless. When Yu Pinyin returned to his room, he saw his little bride sitting cross-legged on the bed. There were many longans, peanuts, and red dates piled up at her feet. There were all kinds of fruit shells scattered on the floor. It was obvious that she hadn't been idle at all. It had only been a quarter of an hour, but her husband had already returned. Yuxiang was shocked. She hurriedly swept the things at her feet under the bed and leaned against the pillow. She supported her chin with one hand and waved the other, assuming a seductive pose. She said in a coquettish voice, "You're back? Quickly come over." If it weren't for the scene of her catching peanuts with her mouth like a hooligan, Yu Pinyin would have definitely been attracted by his little wife's seductive appearance. However, at this moment all he wanted to do was laugh. Tao Hong and Lulu had already slipped out of the room along the wall. Yuxiang had already thought about how to spend her passionate wedding night. She didn't expect to lose so much face before it even started. She angrily said, "What are you laughing at? These peanuts have a good meaning. I ate a lot of them tonight. Next year, I'll give birth to a big fat boy for you." It's said that a moment of *** is worth 1,000 gold. You're only focused on laughing, but you don't know that you've already wasted tens of thousands of gold. Quickly come over. As she spoke, she untied the knot on her doo-doo. Yu Pinyin couldn't laugh anymore. 2 balls of dark fire ignited in his eyes. He strode over to his delicate and delicious little wife and pulled her into his arms. He said in a hoarse voice, "Your husband was wrong. I'll help my wife right now." Yuxiang only had time to grunt before she was pulled into a charming and fiery vortex. Chapter 137. Yu Pinyin opened his eyes, then reflexively hugged the warm body in his arms even tighter. His large hands moved up and down while he breathed heavily. "Stop messing around, it's time to go to court." Yuxiang flipped over and muttered vaguely. "It's my day off today," Yu Pinyin chuckled, then walked in with his back to her. Tao Hong and Lulu, who were about to enter the room to help their master wash up, couldn't help but blush when they heard the passionate moans. The two of them messed around until the sun was high up in the sky before they got up to greet the old lady. "Come over and eat breakfast, I waited for you guys the entire morning." The old lady scolded them, but had a doting smile on her face. The two of them excused themselves, then after they sat down, Yuxiang picked up a crystal shrimp dumpling, then immediately spat it out after taking a bite, then muttered, "What a strong fishy smell. The chef must have forgotten to get rid of the fishy smell today. I'm eating the same as usual. I'm getting old and my tongue is getting blunt." The old lady took a bite and sighed helplessly. "Don't eat it if it's fishy. Eat it." Yu Pinyin scooped a bowl of fish porridge for his wife, then used his finger to wipe off the sauce on the corner of her mouth, then put it into his mouth to suck. "This is fishy too." Yuxiang only sniffed it slightly, then turned her head away in disdain. "What's wrong with the cook, are you sick?" Today's cooking isn't as good as before. Yu Pinyin drank a mouthful, then gave up when he truly couldn't taste the fishy smell, then told Tao Hong to go to the kitchen and get a bowl of noodles. Since Yu Xiang loved to eat coriander, Tao Hong spread a thick layer of coriander on the chicken noodles. The creamy white chicken soup that gave off a rich fragrance seemed even more delicious with the green coriander as a contrast. Yu Xiang sniffed it, then was satisfied. She picked up her chopsticks and mixed it well, then put it into her mouth, then immediately spat it out. Where did you buy this coriander? Why does it taste wrong? It's so smelly. How can that be? Isn't it just the taste of coriander? The old lady took a piece of coriander from her bowl and chewed it, looking very puzzled. Yu Pinyin didn't even try it. Instead, she waved her hand and asked the kitchen staff to change the dishes again. They changed 4 or 5 of Yu Xiang's favorite dishes in a row, but she rejected them all for one reason or another. Yu Pinyin didn't dare to delay any longer. He immediately took out his invitation and asked the servants to call for the imperial physician. Your wife is pregnant. She has been pregnant for more than 2 months. The fetus is very stable. Please rest assured, Duke. The imperial physician stood up and congratulated him. Everyone in the room was stunned, including Yu Xiang, the mother of the child. I'm pregnant? But last month I had a menorrhagia. Yu Xiang stupidly touched her stomach. When Yu Pinyin heard this, he immediately suppressed the ecstasy in his heart and ordered, Imperial physician, carefully check my wife's pulse again. Don't worry, High Duke, your wife's health is fine. Some people do have their periods in the first 2 months of pregnancy. Although it's different from normal people, it doesn't affect the body. This humble one will prescribe some medicine for your wife. She'll be fine after taking it for 2 or 3 days. Open, open, open. Quickly open it. The old lady finally regained her senses. After urging the imperial physician, she put her hands together and prayed to the gods. Her grandson and granddaughter-in-law had been married for 2 years, but there was still no good news. She was really anxious. The imperial physician hurriedly went to the next room to prescribe medicine. After Yu Xiang finished touching her stomach, she suddenly jumped up and hung onto her husband. She carefully pecked his forehead, cheeks, and the tip of his nose. Only when his face was covered in saliva did she shout happily, I'm pregnant, I'm having a baby. I'm going to be a mother. That's right, I'm going to be a father too. Yu Pinyin hurriedly held her butt and kissed her back. The couple was immersed in endless joy. The old lady smiled and shook her head. She let the servants out. When they reached the door, she worriedly said, Quickly put Xiang down after you've hugged her enough. Don't let her fall. The withered family had always been a sore point for the old lady. Ever since Master Ho and her son passed away one after another, the Lin clan and Yu Miaoqi were exiled to Shua City, and Yu Siyu was married off. There were only 3 masters left in the huge Duke of Yu's household. On normal days there were groups of servants coming and going, so it wasn't obvious. On the eve of New Year's Eve, the 3 of them sat around a huge round table to eat a reunion dinner. That scene was truly lonely. In the past 2 years, the old lady didn't forget to add incense oil to the child-giving guanyin every month. The paintings in her granddaughter-in-law's room were all replaced with paintings of hundreds of children and thousands of grandchildren. She had been looking forward to the stars and the moon, and finally, her little great-great-great-grandson had arrived. When she heard that Yu Siyu's eldest brother-in-law was celebrating his 30th birthday, she originally didn't want to pay attention to it. But now, she happily took her granddaughter-in-law out. When you go, tell Siyu to share some of your good fortune. She's already been married for 2 years, but there's still no news. Sitting in the swaying carriage, the old lady's joy diminished slightly. Didn't the doctor say that there's no problem with her and son-in-law's health? Perhaps it's fate that hasn't arrived yet. When fate arrives, it'll naturally come. Look, isn't that the case for me? Yu Xiang happily rubbed her belly. You're right. The old lady's joy returned. Halfway through the journey, Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and glanced at it. She instructed, Turn to Chongning Street, I want to buy a box of rouge. The coachman familiarly headed to Chongning Street. Yu Pinyin, who was following beside the carriage, heard this and reined in the horse's head. She lifted the curtain and said helplessly, Little vinegar jar. Why are you still bickering with her? How many years ago was that? You need to bicker with this kind of thing for a lifetime. Why do you have tender feelings for the fairer sex? Yu Xiang sat up and stuck out her belly, which was not yet obvious. She looked very aggrieved. Before Yu Pinyin could speak, the old lady had already pulled her to sit down. She gently said, "The carriage is swaying. Little ancestor, hurry up and sit properly so you don't fall. Your brother only loves you. Why would he pity others? Isn't that right, Yandere?" She glared fiercely at her grandson. Yu Pinyin nodded, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Yu Xiang finally calmed down. She didn't know why, but she had been increasingly angry these past few days. From time to time she would get angry and she couldn't control herself. Fortunately, her husband and mother-in-law were very obedient and indulged her. The carriage stopped in front of a stall selling rouge and face powder on Chongning Street. Yu Xiang lifted the curtain and said slowly, "Marchioness, bring me a box of rouge. I want the cheapest one." The woman standing behind the stall turned pale. Red, purple and finally black. However, no matter how angry she was, she saw the handsome man with a cold expression not far away. She could only humbly bend her knees and hand over a box of rouge. This woman was Chang Yafu. Because the Duke of Jingwa had participated in the rebellion of Prince Li 2 years ago, he was sentenced to be executed. The old, weak, women and children in his family were all made into servants. Because Chang Yafu was young and beautiful, she had some capital. A small peddler took a fancy to her, and bought her for only 10 taels of silver. Not only did he help her get rid of her slave status, he even took her as his official wife. Chang Yafu was originally unwilling, but after seeing her younger brother who was a manservant in a rich family, and her mother who was a cleaning lady, she completely accepted her fate. Every day she took care of the household, took care of her husband and taught her children. Gradually, she became accustomed to the lowly life of a commoner. Her eldest sister also couldn't escape the disaster. Just as the Duke's household was in trouble, she suddenly fell ill and died. She didn't know if it was her husband's family who did it. The peddler's surname was Ho, so it wasn't wrong for Yu Xiang to call her Marchioness. However, Chang Yafu still remembered the words she mouthed to Yu Xiang when she returned to the capital from her hometown. Every time she thought about it, she felt so ashamed that she wanted to die. Marchioness, she almost became a real marchioness. If it weren't for her greed for wealth and glory, she would have married Yu Pinyin long ago. With her help, the Duke of Jingwa wouldn't have walked the path of destruction. When it was late at night and she couldn't sleep, she would often reflect on the past and herself. That kind of endless regret was like a strong poison, slowly seeping into her every nerve. She wished she could knock herself into a fool, so that she could forget those unbearable memories of the past. However, every time Yu Xiang went out, he would purposely walk in front of her and sweetly call her Marchioness. That little mouth was so beautiful, but why was it so vicious? However, no matter how dissatisfied she was, she didn't dare to go against Yu Xiang when she was still the legitimate daughter of the Duke of Jingwa Fu. Now she didn't dare. She quickly glanced at the tall and handsome man with an outstanding temperament, then began to clean up the stall. Today Yu Xiang came, and the nearby stall owners wanted to talk about her past. She couldn't bear it. The carriage drove far away. Yu Xiang suddenly felt bored. He casually threw the rouge to the side and sighed. "I won't come in the future." "You finally thought it through?" The matriarch lovingly stroked the messy hair by her cheek. "No, I have to take care of the baby at home in the future. How can I have time to pay attention to her? I already have the first, so how far can the second, third, and fourth be?" Recently, Yu Xiang liked to stroke her belly more and more, even if she couldn't feel anything right now. So this was what it felt like to be a mother. It was like a seal had suddenly been unlocked in her brain. She felt like her entire person had been raised to another level. Her chest was filled with endless joy and anticipation. Hearing this, the matriarch hugged her and laughed loudly. Which elder didn't like to have many children and grandchildren? It was great that her granddaughter-in-law had this awareness. Yu Siyu's husband, Xiao Xuanzi, was originally a 4th-rank Yunhui general. During Prince Li's rebellion, he stuck to his principles and stood on the crown prince's side. After the rebellion, he was promoted to a 3rd-rank Shaoqi general. In addition, His brother-in-law was the famous commander of the Dragonscale Guard, Yu Pinyin. He was like a fish in water in the imperial court. However, his eldest brother, Xiao Xianhui, made a misstep and was won over by the fifth prince. When the entire family Yu was imprisoned, he advised him to break off the marriage and remarry. In the end, the fifth prince was stripped of his title and became an idle member of the imperial family. His eldest brother's family also didn't fare well, almost losing their scholarly honors. In the past 2 years, with his younger brother's help, they slowly improved and became a fifth-rank Honglu Temple Shaoqing. In order to expand his network and let the higher-ups realize how strong his backing was, Xiao Xianhui repeatedly begged his younger brother to invite Duke Yu. In the end, this matter fell on Yu Siyu's head. Yu Siyu understood her brother's habit of not liking social gatherings. She only sent someone to inform the matriarch and didn't force it. Therefore, when she bumped into her brother dismounting at the door, her eyes widened in surprise. "Big brother, why are you here?" "To accompany Xiang'er to relax," Yu Pinyin said as he carefully carried his wife down from the carriage. The matriarch stood on the shaft of the carriage and bent over to support her granddaughter-in-law. She repeatedly warned her grandson to be careful and not to bump into anything. These two pampered Yu Siyu to the point that it angered both the gods and men. Although today was a little exaggerated, Yu Siyu didn't think much of it and went forward to help her sister-in-law. "Why did you bring them along?" Seeing the pink-clothed beautiful woman and white-clothed youth standing behind Yu Siyu's brows furrowed tightly, causing the beautiful woman to lower her head and cover her face to make a panicked and helpless expression. The youth glared back at her, not to be outdone. Yu Siyu curled her lips and pointed at her husband who was chatting with her brother. She said in a low voice, "He told me to bring them to see the world. He said something about how they are the sons of a benefactor, so it's not good to mistreat them." In the first year, Yu Siyu had lived very comfortably, thinking that she had married a good man who valued friendship and righteousness. Who knew that it wasn't a good thing for a good man to value friendship and righteousness too much? No matter how deeply his greedy and ungrateful eldest brother-in-law had hurt him, he didn't learn from his mistakes. The next time he needed help, he would still willingly help. If the two of them hadn't separated from the family and their parents-in-law had both passed away, who knew how much of a burden he would have had? Last year, he had been sent by the emperor to suppress bandits in the Shi Mountains. When he came back, he actually brought back a young and beautiful woman and a young youth, saying that they were the children of his deputy general, Li Fenghua. Li Fenghua had died in order to save him, and before his death, he had entrusted his children to him. Yu Siyu originally planned to prepare a dowry for the woman to marry off, and then find a good marriage for the youth. Who knew that the other party would be so careless? The woman actually took advantage of her husband's drunken state to have intimate contact with him. When the youth saw that they had succeeded, he went to lure Yu Siyu over. Yu Siyu rushed over and caught them in the act. He was so angry that he almost vomited blood. No matter what, he had to drive the two out. The next day, the woman knelt in front of the Shao residence's door and refused to get up. The youth pointed at the horizontal board above the door and scolded Xiao Xuanzi for being a beast in human clothing. Yu Siyu had no choice but to take the woman in as a noble concubine. She originally thought that her husband had suffered a loss and would at least learn his lesson. Who knew that the two siblings only needed to pretend to be weak and lonely to win him over again, making Yu Siyu suffer unspeakably. Family Yu had never liked to be taken advantage of, but he didn't expect that he would suffer such a big loss in the end, and there was no way to reason with them. Therefore, when the matriarch and Yu Xiang saw the two people, they felt disgusted and pulled Yu Siyu inside, leaving them hanging on the spot. The beautiful woman blinked a pair of clear and crystalline eyes and looked towards Xiao Xuanzi. Her eyes just happened to meet Yu Pinyin's bottomless eyes. She was frightened and quickly took small steps, dragging her brother, who still had an angry expression on his face, inside. There was a stage set up in the courtyard, and the male and female guests were separated by several carved screens. They sat around a round table, drinking tea and listening to the play. When the matriarch saw that her granddaughter-in-law was about to raise her cup to drink, she quickly stopped her in a low voice. She also saw that her eyes were staring at a plate of pastries on the table, as if she was drooling. She thickened her skin and got up, going around half the table to bring it to her. Eat slowly, be careful not to choke. AI, don't drink the tea on the table, drink the ginseng tea I brought. Wancho, go to the carriage and bring the food box I prepared in advance. The matriarch lightly patted her granddaughter-in-law's back and helped her wipe the pastry crumbs from the corner of her mouth. Matriarch, are you serving your granddaughter-in-law or serving your little ancestor? A noblewoman teased. Xiang'er is pregnant. Isn't she our prefecture-used little ancestor? The matriarch's words were not without a hint of boasting. Foreign is pregnant? That's really worthy of celebration. I wonder when sister-in-law will also have good news? Xiao Xuanhui's wife, Madame Wu, had a smile on her face, but her eyes were full of ridicule. She was originally the eldest sister-in-law, but because of her husband's official career, she had no choice but to lower herself in front of Yusiyu. Her heart had long been filled with humiliation and jealousy. Although she couldn't openly oppose Yusiyu, she liked to poke her from time to time. Speaking of this, Yusiyu couldn't help but feel sad and subconsciously touched her belly. Just at this moment, Madame Li, who was standing behind her, suddenly turned her head and bent over to retch. Her thick eyelashes were covered with tears and looked very lovable. The opera troupe was changing the stage, so the sound of gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Thus, her movements were particularly noticeable. Madame Wu was stunned, then exclaimed with joy, "Sister-in-law, don't tell me you're pregnant? I'll send someone to find a doctor for you." As soon as she finished speaking, Yusiyu suddenly turned her head to look at Madame Li with a cold and stern gaze. Yuxiang leisurely smiled and said, "Whether she's pregnant or not, Siyu will check when we get back. Today is a joyous occasion, yet you're openly inviting a doctor into the house. You're really not particular. Moreover, she's just a concubine. How can she be worthy of being called sister-in-law? Foreign is willing to be cheap, so don't implicate our Siyu." As soon as she finished speaking, she gently patted Yusiyu's tightly clenched fist. Yusiyu quickly calmed down and didn't say anything. She only glanced at Madame Wu with a smile that wasn't a smile. Because the male and female guests were only separated by a few screens, everything that was said on the other side could be easily heard. Not to mention when the gongs and drums stopped for a moment. Xiao Xianhui and Xiao Xuanzi awkwardly nodded and apologized to the expressionless Yupinian. Madame Li's younger brother was quite arrogant, so he couldn't help but show some resentment. Yupinian picked up his wine glass and poured himself a drink. From time to time, he would send someone over to remind his wife not to be picky with her food and drink. Xiao Xuanzi was originally his former subordinate, but because of the concubine incident a year ago, their relationship was no longer the same as before. At this moment they sat opposite each other in silence. When others saw the stagnant atmosphere at the main table, they all shook their heads and secretly lamented that the Xiao brothers didn't know how to conduct themselves. One was too indecisive while the other was too greedy. Sooner or later, they would gradually drift away from family you. While they were thinking, a brightly colored female lead came out from the stage. She held a golden goblet in her hand and began to sing the song Drunken Imperial Concubine. She walked to the side of the stage with graceful and swaying steps. Her bewitching and misty eyes were fixed on the handsome young man at the main table. With such an obvious action, not to mention the jealous Yuxiang, even the bystanders noticed the clues. The old madam hurriedly pressed her granddaughter-in-law's shoulder and whispered, "Calm down, don't throw a tantrum. You're pregnant right now." Yuxiang touched the baby in her belly and had no choice but to restrain herself. Yusiyu also forgot to bicker with Madame Li, and sent someone to inquire about the female lead's background. Madame Wu smiled as she picked up her teacup and took a sip. She said, "There's no need to inquire. She's the famous female lead Xian Luo. The Xian Luo that the sixth prince didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money to take in." Yuxiang raised her brows and said slowly, "This name is really euphemistic. Xian Luo, why not just call her Little Radish?" Yusiyu almost spat out the tea in her mouth. On the other end of the line, Yupinian finally showed his first smile of the day. His deep eyes were filled with love. The female lead on the stage was subdued by his affectionate gaze. She paused for a moment before starting to sing the next line. When she turned around, she smiled at him. Madame Li's younger brother finally couldn't hold himself back. He pointed at her and said with a smile, "I think she looks a bit familiar. She looks like someone." No one at the table responded, and the atmosphere immediately became a bit awkward. Xiao Xuanzi tried to smooth things over because he was the son of his benefactor. "Oh, who does she look like?" "She looks like Madame Duque. If the heavy makeup on her face was washed away, her beauty would be comparable to Madame's." Comparing a lowly actress to the Duque's wife, and doing it in front of Yupinian, was this young masterly crazy? Anyone who had stayed in the capital for a long time knew that Yupinian loved his wife as much as his life. The guests who were chatting or laughing all quieted down, as if their pressure points had been pressed. Xiao Xuanzi, who had answered him, blushed and looked anxiously at Yupinian. Yupinian's face was covered with a layer of frost. He put down his wine cup with a thud and stood up to leave. When he reached the screen, he turned around and said, "General Xiao, I forgot to tell you. My family has a rule: men are not allowed to take concubines. If you marry Siyu, you will be a member of my Xiao family. If you don't abide by the rules, I, Yupinian, can dispose of you. Goodbye." On the other end, Yu Xiang and the old madam tugged at Yu Siyu, who was completely stunned. If it weren't for her brother's example, Yu Siyu could still force herself to accept her fate. However, now that there was a comparison, she became dissatisfied. She was mostly grateful to Xiao Xuanzi. If she really wanted to talk about love, it was far from the point where she could only be with him. In addition, in recent years, she had been schemed against by the Li siblings and quarreled with Xiao Xuanzi every few days. That little bit of gratitude had long been worn away, leaving only exhaustion. She drained the strong wine beside her and said calmly, "Let's go home. Go back to the family, you." If this place didn't hold her, there would be a place for her to stay. Madame Wu knew that something was wrong. She wanted to stop them, but was separated by the prefecture Yu's guards. She could only watch as the group of people walked away. Without Duke Yu's strong backing, her brother-in-law's dull personality would sooner or later be ostracized by his colleagues. Only now did she understand that Yu Siyu was not only her sister-in-law, but also the pillar of the Xiao family. As the saying goes, everyone kicks a man who is down. If she left, the Xiao family would face the danger of collapse at any moment. Madame Li was secretly happy, but her face showed some grievance. She lowered her head and wiped her tears. Madame Wu didn't care whether the occasion was right or not. She slammed the table and scolded, "What are you crying for? It's all your brother's fault. Brother-in-law, hurry up and go to the Duke's mansion to apologize." Xiao Xuanzi recovered from his daze and hurriedly chased after them. Xiao Xianhui sent the guests away awkwardly. When he turned back to look at the Li siblings, his eyes were filled with gloomy killing intent. Young Master Li was just acting on a whim. Now that he came to his senses, he knew that he had caused a great disaster. He immediately trembled in fear. In order to appease Duque, there were two paths in front of the Xiao family. One, simply divorce Yu Siyu. Two, get rid of him and his sister. Young Master Li's intestines turned green with regret when he provoked a fatal disaster with just one sentence. After Yu Siyu returned home, she settled down for a few days. She felt that it would be impossible for her to find a perfect husband like her brother in this lifetime. However, she was a proud person. In addition, she had been influenced by Yu Xiang for a long time. She would rather let go than go back and compromise. Without Madame Li, there would be Madame Zhao, Madame Qian, and Madame Sun in the future. She would waste her life fighting with other women. How boring and ridiculous it would be. She didn't let Xiao Xuanzi deal with the Li siblings. Instead, she signed the divorce papers. After Xiao Xuanzi returned home, he fell seriously ill. After recovering from his illness, he found that he had been demoted. He was transferred to the most remote and desolate northern tribes and could never return to the capital in this lifetime. He took the Li siblings with him. On the way, Madame Li couldn't bear the labor and miscarried. Young Master Li knew that the northern tribes was a barren land. Not to mention his future, he might even die of exhaustion. He took advantage of the night to escape. In the end, Yu Siyu remarried and became the second wife. Coincidentally, The other party was the small steward that Yu Xiang had taken a fancy to when she first proposed marriage. There was a rule in the family: no concubine before 40 and without a son. Chapter 138. Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan had already been on the road for 2 months, and they would arrive at Shua City in half a month. Shua City, other than a simple city, was only left with an endless lush slope. Whether it was from the ground or from the air, all that was left was a barren land. If a man wanted to survive here, he could only bury himself in the barren land and grow enough food to survive. Women could only rely on men. Because the land was barren and the climate was harsh, men couldn't even feed themselves, so how could they feed their wives? Therefore, women were often seen as burdens. Other than giving birth to children, they could only be used to vent their anger or lust. There was no man in Shua City who didn't like to beat his wife. Under long periods of hard work and abuse, women in Shua City usually lived very short lives. There were very few people who could live past the age of 40. Yu Miaoqi inquired about the situation in Shua City all the way, and the more she heard, the colder her heart became. On this day, the exile team stopped at an abandoned relay station. Everyone found an empty seat to sit down and took out the dry food in their bags to eat. At this time, the moon was high in the sky, and the extremely haggard faces were plated with a layer of bleak white under the moonlight, looking very frightening. Yu Miaoqi suddenly felt a prickly feeling in her back. She turned her head and found that it was a prison guard. The other side was chewing on beef jerky while staring at her with bloodshot eyes. His dark pupils were filled with tyranny and lust. Among all the female prisoners, only Yu Miaoqi was an unmarried young girl. She looked very beautiful, and although she was stained with dust, she was very eye-catching in the contrast of a group of dusty old women. The prison guard had been holding back for a long time and could no longer hold back. He finished chewing the beef jerky in 2 or 3 bites, and strode over to Yu Miaoqi and dragged her into the bushes. "What are you doing? Help, mother, save me!" Yu Miaoqi screamed. The Lin clan hurriedly rushed over, but was kicked over by the prison guard. She clutched her chest and couldn't get up for a long time. "What's the rush? Once I'm done with her, it'll naturally be your turn." The other party's sinister laughter startled the birds in the treetops. "I am Duke Yu's younger sister. If you touch me, Duke Yu will definitely cut you into pieces." Yu Miaoqi screamed at the top of her lungs. The Lin clan also hurriedly chimed in, trying to make the jailer back off. The jailer hesitated, but he still held onto Yu Miaoqi's neck and turned to look at the leader of the guards. "She is indeed Duke Yu's sister. Just don't kill her. I promised old Madame Yu that I would send them to Shua City alive." The guard waved his hand casually. Really? Is it really fine as long as you don't kill him?" The jailer doubted his ears. He wasn't from the capital. Because he had offended his superiors, he was sent here at the last minute to replenish his supplies. He had only heard of the Prefecture Yu case, but he didn't know the inside story. The guard laughed sarcastically. In order to help Prince Li fight for the throne, she put fabricated evidence in Duke Yu's study to frame Duke Yu and the Crown Prince for rebellion. When Duke Yu fell into the Wu River, his life and death were unknown. She colluded with her mother and third uncle to frame Duke Yu. Basin after basin of dirty water was poured non-stop. Not to mention the siblings, I'm afraid that even the enemy who killed their father was nothing more than this. If Duke Yu hadn't luckily survived and defeated the Western continent, I don't know to what extent the family Yu's branch would have been destroyed by her. Old Madame Yu said that as long as the person is alive, she doesn't care about anything else. If you want to do it, do it. Just don't go too far. My mother, there is actually such a sinister woman in the world. It can be said that the saying, "The mouth of a green bamboo snake and the sting of a wasp's tail are both not poisonous, but the most poisonous is a woman's heart." The jailer was speechless. He looked at Yu Miaoqi with an even fiercer gaze. He pinched her neck and pushed her behind a tree. Then there was the sound of tearing clothes and a woman's miserable howl. The Lin clan wanted to go over, but they were stopped by the guard. He warned, "He has been holding back for 2 months. Now he is a hungry wolf. After eating that, he will eat you to fill his stomach." Think carefully before you go over. The Lin clan suddenly froze. They knelt for a moment, then slowly retreated into the crowd. They buried their faces in the bundle and sobbed. Because he had been holding back for so long, the first time was quickly over. The jailer rested for a moment and then continued. Yu Miaoqi was tossed and turned for almost an hour. When she came out, she pulled up her pants and whistled. Her whole body was relaxed. Yu Miaoqi, on the other hand, was the exact opposite. Her clothes had long been torn to pieces, and there were still traces of tears on her face. When she walked towards Mrs. Lin, her legs were slightly trembling, and she could barely stand. She avoided the sympathetic, numb or gloating gazes of the female prisoners. She took out a robe and wrapped it around herself. She silently cried. She never would have thought that her pure body would be taken by such a lowly person. It wasn't until the other party had pierced through her body and continued to hurl insults at her that she truly realized that she was no longer the legitimate daughter of a rich and powerful family. Instead, she was a prisoner, a refugee, an existence even worse than a slave. Before she even reached Shua City, she had already fallen into a situation worse than death. How was she going to live the rest of her days? In endless despair, Yu Miaoqi finally walked into the city that stood in the middle of a desolate slope. However, she still had some luck. Because of her beautiful and clean appearance, she was chosen by the steward of the city Lord Manor to be a servant. The Lin clan also picked her to be a rough servant. Every day, she was responsible for washing clothes for her master. Today, after receiving her monthly allowance, Yu Miaoqi bought a box of rouge to apply to a mirror. She wasn't a cheerful person to begin with. Now that the corners of her eyes were drooping, she seemed even more gloomy. Between her eyebrows, there seemed to be a layer of dark energy that wouldn't disperse. It looked very frightening. The Lin clan didn't like to get close to her. Seeing that she had changed into a set of rather vulgar clothes after putting on makeup, they couldn't help but ask cautiously, "What are you doing?" "Doing something that can let us live a good life. Don't be a demon. Madam is a powerful person. If she catches you, you'll be finished. As long as I obtain the city lord's favor and have the city lord's child, what can a hen that can't lay eggs do to me?" Yu Miaoqi didn't care. She swayed her small waist and walked out. After losing her purity, she might as well smash the jar. As long as she could live a rich and stable life again, she was willing to do anything. The Lin clan stared at her back for a long time without saying anything. In the end, they could only sigh. In the end, Yu Miaoqi had some tricks up her sleeves. After going out for a few rounds, she had the city lord completely infatuated. Half a year later, she had successfully conceived a child. The city lord's wife was so anxious that a string of blisters appeared on her mouth. She racked her brains to think of a way to kill this vixen. Her maternal cousin was a merchant and was the most well-informed. He quickly found out the ins and outs of Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan. He sent someone to report to his cousin. The city lord's wife was overjoyed. She walked to the study and said to the city lord, "You dare to put such an ungrateful and insidious thing to your bed? Aren't you afraid that she'll stab you to death after giving birth to a child and take over your hard-earned family business? Don't think that Duke will appreciate your kindness just because you treat her well. Don't think about how cold-blooded Duke is. He only sent Yu Miaoqi here for one purpose, to make her suffer so much that she'd rather die. You, on the other hand, gave her riches and honor. Although our Shua city is desolate, it's still a strategic town on the border. Every 3 years the emperor will send Duke to patrol the border. If he knows what you've done, he definitely won't forgive you." The city lord was drenched in cold sweat when he heard this. He quickly apologized to his wife and begged her to quietly deal with Yu Miaoqi and the Lin clan. The city lord's wife was waiting for him to say this. Only then did Yu Miaoqi remember that she had already severed ties with her family Yu. She quickly knelt down and begged for mercy. Her head was extremely low, not daring to meet Yu Pinyan's eyes. "You can leave." Yu Pinyan waved his sleeve and said to the city lord, "This official does not need anyone to serve me. I only need a pot of wine to drink by myself. Do as you please." When the city lord saw that his attitude was so frivolous, His anger towards his madam's improper handling of matters instantly dissipated. He wanted to persuade him to enjoy one or two beauties, but he heard Dukyu's trusted aide tease, "You don't know, do you? Dukyu is afraid of his wife. Even though he's far away at the border, he doesn't dare to act recklessly. He's determined to protect his madam's chastity." Yu Pinyin smiled slightly and actually admitted it in front of Shua City's officials. That's exactly the case. Because of love there was worry. Because of love there was fear. Being afraid of his wife was also an expression of loving his wife. Of course, he definitely wouldn't say these words to these mediocre people, nor did he need others to understand. He just needed to stick to his bottom line. The city lord didn't dare to say more. Seeing that Dukyu's aides were happily drinking and making merry, he slowly let go. After Yu Miaoqi left the room, she stood frozen for a long time. Only when the guards in the hallway came forward to chase her away did she stagger away. "I saw Big Brother. He's in the banquet hall. Aren't you going to take a look?" She grabbed onto the Lin clan, her eyes bursting with hope. Yu Pinyin could ignore her, but how could he ignore his own mother? The Lin clan stared blankly for a long time before slowly coming back to her senses. She smiled bitterly. "What's there to look at? I've long severed our relationship as mother and son. Just obediently stay here and don't think about anything else. We're here to atone for our sins. We definitely can't leave Shua City in this lifetime." She grabbed her daughter's shoulders and used all her strength to press her down on the embroidered stool. Her eyes were filled with determination. Yu Miaoqi struggled for a bit, but in the end, she hung her head dejectedly. Endless regret surged in her heart. If she hadn't wanted to compete with Yu Xiong back then, if she had complied with the matriarch's arrangements and gotten married, if she had. In order not to add to the sorrow, he could only suppress the desire in his heart. He waved his hand and said, "Princess, you can eat it yourself. This official has no interest in sweet pastries. Please don't send food boxes to this official's residence in the future." The ninth princess was stunned and forced a smile. "So you don't like to eat pastries?" "Actually, I don't like it either. I won't eat it anymore." "Then what do you like? I'll send you off instead." She stretched out her fingertips and unconsciously messed up the petal-shaped pastries. She looked very depressed. Replying to the ninth princess, "This official doesn't have any other hobbies. I don't dare to trouble the princess." Shen Yuanqi couldn't bear it and added, "The pastries have already been brought. It would be a waste if you don't eat them. This official will accompany the princess to eat one or two pieces. After eating, I still have important matters to discuss with my colleagues. I have to leave first. The princess doesn't have to send things to my residence in the future. This official's fortune is poor and I'm afraid I can't afford it." How could the ninth princess not feel such an obvious refusal? She blinked her wet eyes and stammered, You will accompany me to eat the pastries before leaving?" Shen Yuanqi hesitated for a moment before nodding. "Yes." The ninth princess picked up a piece of pastry and used her teeth to grind it bit by bit. After grinding for a long time, she still didn't see the pastry wrapping the outside layer. If she ate it like this, she wouldn't be able to finish it even if the sun set. Shen Yuanqi wanted to laugh, but he restrained himself just as the corners of his mouth rose. The young girl in front of him was so pure and beautiful. She should be together with the most outstanding man in the great Han dynasty. However, she wasn't a match for him. A poor scholar without any background. The ninth princess slowly licked the pastry wrapping with the tip of her tongue. Her wet eyes were fixed on the young man's incomparably handsome face. It was as if the other party was the wine that accompanied the meal. Before drinking, she was already drunk. 2 clusters of red quietly floated on her cheeks. Shen Yuanqi's whole body heated up from her gaze. He felt as if he was sitting on pins and needles. Just as he was hesitating whether he should leave or not, he saw his manservant hurriedly run over and report, "Master, Wu Darren is looking for you." "What's the matter?" "This servant doesn't know. He said that he has something important to discuss with you." After speaking, he saw the ninth princess and quickly knelt down to salute. It was just a random excuse. He didn't expect that someone would be so cooperative. Shen Yuanqi breathed a sigh of relief and immediately got up to leave. When he walked far away, the ninth princess ate the pastry in her hand in 2 or 3 mouthfuls. She rubbed her red eyes. I want the Lord Shen to be my prince consort. I ask imperial brother to grant me a marriage. She stood up with a firm expression on her face. Half a year ago, Yu Xiang smoothly gave birth to the eldest son of the Duke of Yu's family. Because he inherited all the advantages of his parents' appearance, the baby had the ability to capture all the women in the Great Han Dynasty when he was still in swaddling clothes. He charmed the matriarch until she was dizzy and disoriented. She held the baby in her arms and refused to let go no matter what. Even when Yu Xiang sent someone to ask for the baby, she complained and scolded him. She also repeatedly urged her grandson to quickly submit a memorial to the throne to ask for the title of heir. Before he was even a month old, he had already become the heir of the Duke of Yu's family. This speed was simply unprecedented. From this, it could be seen that the family Yu loved babies. At this time, the matriarch was carrying her grandson to the training hall to watch the banquet, leaving Yu Xiang to socialize with a group of noble ladies. Madame Xue pulled Yu Xiang to a side hall and asked, "Your eldest brother is already over 20 years old, but he doesn't have a single person by his side who cares about him. Have you ever made a decision for him?" Shen Yuanqi neither took a concubine nor was he willing to take a wife. He was already 24 or 25 years old, and in the Great Han Dynasty, he was considered an old leftover man. However, Yu Xiang was not an ancient person. He didn't worry about him in the slightest. Thus he smiled and said, "If he wants to marry, then marry. If he doesn't want to marry, then so be it. Why should I make a decision for him? This matter depends on fate and mutual affection. It can't be forced." "You can't say it like that. A man should first establish a family and then establish a career. Only with a wife and children can he live comfortably and have a goal." Madame Xue's face was smiling, but her gaze towards Yu Xiang was somewhat cold. In the end, they were still half-siblings and didn't have much affection for each other. Otherwise, how could she be so indifferent to her elder brother? She didn't even think about how much effort Shen Yuanqi had put in when the family Yu was in dire straits. She really was an ingrate who forgot favors and violated justice. Yu Xiang sensed the change in her expression, but he didn't take it to heart. Raising his brows, he asked, "Madame's words are reasonable. Since Madame has asked, presumably you already have a candidate in mind? Quickly tell me so that I can help Big Brother take a look." Madame Xue finally revealed a satisfied expression when she saw that Yu Xiang was on the right track. "I really did find a girl for him, my niece. She just reached marriageable age this year. Not only is she gentle and beautiful, she also has some talent. She will definitely be very compatible with Yuanqi." "Today, I brought her over to the Dao Hall. Would you like to take a look?" Upon hearing that the other party was Madame Xue's niece, Yu Xiang's eyes flashed with a cold light. Just as he was about to refuse, he heard a flustered and exasperated voice from the entrance to the hall. "No, the Lord Shen is my prince consort. He can't marry anyone else." The two immediately turned their heads and saw the ninth princess with her hands on her hips and a pout on her lips, fiercely glaring at Madame Xue. Madame Xue jumped in fright and stammered, When did Yuanqi become the prince consort? How come this commoner didn't know? After today he will. I will return to the palace and ask imperial brother to issue a decree." The ninth princess walked up to Madame Xue and looked down at her with her 2 nostrils. Imitating the dignified bearing of the Empress Dowager and imperial sister-in-law, she reprimanded, "You're quite bold, daring to even steal this prince consort. Which family are you from? Hurry and tell me your name." No matter how foolish the ninth princess was, she had still been pampered and raised by the emperor, empress and crown prince. Her awe-inspiring noble aura was not something an ordinary person could endure. Madame Xue was pressed down so hard that she couldn't breathe. She looked pleadingly at Yu Xiang. Yu Xiang smiled as he patted the ninth princess and introduced her. "This is Madame Xue, my big brother's foster mother. Back then, Master Xue was my big brother's benefactor. Princess, for his sake, please do not bicker with Madame Xue." "So it was you." The ninth princess no longer pouted. She also lowered her raised chin and looked at the sweet ninth princess. Madame Shui still has matters to attend to, so I will send her off. Princess, please wait here for a moment. When I return, I will discuss my big brother's marriage with you. Deliberately emphasizing the last two words, Yu Xiang gave the ninth princess a deep glance, then supported Madame Shui, who seemed to have been pardoned, out. The two turned a corner, and Yu Xiang whispered into her ear, My big brother remembers your kindness and has taken great care of your Shui estate in these past few years. He has also never had any improper thoughts. However, you use the yardstick of a petty person to measure the heart of a gentleman. You always believe that my big brother frequently interacts with you because he has his eye on the Shui estate's business, so you are always on guard against him. From time to time your cold words will stab at his heart. This is nothing. My big brother can endure it and so can I. But you actually take our tolerance for granted, and now you're even scheming against him. If you marry your niece, my big brother's inner residence will be in your hands. If you give birth to a son who inherits the family business, will my big brother's estate be surnamed Chan or Shui? I'll tell you the truth. My tolerance for you has already reached its limit. If you dare to have any devious thoughts, I only need to move my little finger to destroy your Shui estate's meager business. You'd best take care of yourself. Madame Shui felt a chill run down her spine. Even after Yu Xiang had walked far away, she was still in a daze. In these past few years, Shen Yuanqi had treated her with reverence, and even Yu Xiang had treated her with courtesy and support. She had actually forgotten just how savage and vindictive this unmarried person had been. Although the Shui estate's business was large, how could it compare to the Duke of Yu's estate? Opposing Yu Xiang was like an ant trying to shake a large tree. And this wasn't even mentioning the fact that the ninth princess had been dragged into this mess. With a gust of cold wind, Madame Shui finally came to her senses. Suppressing the fear in her heart, she fled with her niece. When Shen Yuanqi heard the ninth princess's declaration at Lane Hall, he didn't know what to feel. It was as if he had eaten several dozen caddies of honey. It was so sweet that his teeth felt weak. Even though he knew it was impossible, he couldn't help but look forward to the future. The Emperor of Changqian, who had just recently ascended the throne, needed to win over a group of capable people who didn't have deep backgrounds. In addition, Shen Yuanqi's conduct was upright, and his inner residence was clean. After some consideration, he decided to help the ninth princess. The ecstasy and gratitude in Shen Yuanqi's heart was indescribable. With his brother-in-law Yu Pinyin as a comparison, he was completely devoted to the ninth princess. He had truly achieved the goal of having only one person for the rest of his life. 166. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.